Welcome back, everybody, to Real Takes. This is the podcast for film fans, by film fans. Max and I are film fans. My name is Riley Granson.
My name is Max Medlin. Real excited to be back with everybody.
I'm pumped. Here. And especially because of the topic of today's show, I'm super excited to talk about this stuff. But, we've been back. We're back. It's been a while. We've been
busy.
Yeah, life's been busy. We've been trying to cram in as many movies as we can before the end of the year because this show is going to be our basically 2018 recap. I do have one new release I want to talk about, like literally really briefly, but then we'll recap 2018. Max and I are each going to count down our top 10 movies of 2018. We'll talk about some performances we really liked, some movies that we were disappointed by, some maybe we were surprised by. Kind of just recap the year, kind of maybe take a look back at the year as a whole, and maybe look forward a little bit to 2019. So, Max, how's everything been going out there in Montana since we've been away?
Oh, it's been good. It's been busy though, which is most of the reason we haven't had the podcast going on. Mm-hmm. It's been real busy. Obviously, took some trips out to see you guys, and came back and dove right in, but winter's been good out here. It's 47 degrees today. We've had about 2 weeks of actual winter. Other than that, it's been nice and warm, so I can't complain, but real excited to jump back and then get all of our 5 fans back involved here.
Yeah, absolutely. If this is the first time you've tuned into this podcast, which it probably is for some people,
you're in for a treat.
You are. Definitely go back and take a look at or check out our other episodes. We've got some movie reviews that we had posted last year. But it's a new year, so we're hopefully going to try to put out more content for everybody in 2019. I'd like to put up this show, since Max is doing like the Friday, Saturday thing days off, so I'd like to get it up like every Sunday if we can. Otherwise, we'll try to be as consistent as possible, but life does get in the way sometimes, and but we're going to...
Yeah, definitely want to do it. There's a long stretch there. I only had 1 day off a week, and I just wanted to lay in bed and die on my day off,
right.
So... things are looking up. Hopefully, in February, we're going to start our 4-on, 4-off schedule, which would be super nice. Give us a lot of time for podcasting. But I definitely got to catch up on some more movies in 2019. I slipped towards the end of 2018 there, but going to try to keep up here in 2019 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2018 was a good year for movies, so we just jump right into it, Max, or do you want to...
Let's just jump right into it. That's what our fans want, and we're going to give it to them.
Okay, so real quick, though, I just want to mention, because in our previous episodes, we always have done kind of previewing the weekends as far as what's coming out brand new. So, again, it's early January, so nothing much coming out new this weekend. I did get a chance to see one movie that is a new release. This is a VOD movie that's available to rent on like iTunes. I just want to talk about that really, really briefly just because, we like to give you guys reviews and recommendations. So I checked out a movie that has one of my favorite actors in it, Michael Shannon, but it's a movie called State Like Sleep. It's directed by Meredith Danluck and stars Michael Shannon, Catherine Waterston, Michael Huisman, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's in Game of Thrones. I can't remember who he is in Game of Thrones. But it's something like that. But anyway, so the film kind of follows Catherine Waterston, and she's a widow. Her husband, who's played by this Michael Huisman or Michelle Huisman. God, it's driving me nuts now because I can't remember who I think he's in Game of Thrones. But anyway, so she's a widow, and her husband is an actress, and he gets killed, and she kind of goes back to Brussels where it takes place. And sort of starts investigating the murder. It's never really clear how long after this murder happens that she's back here, but like her mom is sick and stuff, so it's kind of basically all I have to say about it is just kind of a run-of-the-mill thriller. Not really anything super interesting. It's directed fairly competently. The performances are fine. Michael Shannon kind of has a thankless role in this movie. He's kind of like staying in the hotel that Catherine Waterston is staying in, and I like Catherine Waterston. I think she's a fine actress. I think she's just fine in this movie. Ultimately, I don't know that it's worth the $7 or whatever it is on iTunes or Amazon or wherever you rent your VOD releases. It is also playing in a few theaters. I did notice here in Minnesota it's playing in Eden Prairie, so I think it's probably playing in like 30 or 40 theaters around the country. It's just one of those movies that kind of jumps into theaters and on iTunes and stuff like that at once. So I just wanted to talk about that movie really quick. It's competently directed. It's written the script's pretty decent, but ultimately it's just kind of boring. It's very predictable. It goes in kind of the direction you think it's going to go in, and it's very like tropey to the extent that you know exactly what you're getting into when you meet the character, because Kathleen Waterston kind of plays this like chilly, sort of like aloof character that you don't really get let into her life, and she kind of goes down a dark path, and she gets tangled up with her ex-husband's, or not ex-husband's, I guess, but dead husband's problems. He was into drugs and stuff like that. So it's fine if you like thrillers. I recommend it's a good watch. I don't know that I'd pay for it. Maybe wait till it pops up on a streaming site for free or something like that, which I'm sure will end up somewhere, because everything nowadays seems to be popping up on streaming sites. So I just wanted to get that out of the way really quick. The movie, again, State Like Sleep, on our scale of see it, rent it, skip it, I'd say you could probably skip this one. It's not a great start to 2019. And I didn't get a chance to go out and see Escape Room yet. Although I kind of want to. I actually am kind of interested to see where that movie goes.
No, it looks really stupid. And that Michelle Hussman is... what is... Oh, I just found it. He is Dario Naharis.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Daenerys' love interest that gets weirdly recast.
Yep. That's right. He's the recast one. I forgot about that. But yeah, so just wanted to get that out of the way. Interested in that movie at all, Max? Had you heard of it?
Escape Room?
No. The movie State Like Sleep.
Oh, I haven't heard a lot about it, but I did see that Michael Shannon had the lead there, and Michael Shannon's always terrific.
Yeah, well, he's not really the lead in the movie.
Isn't he?
No, I mean, Kathleen Waterston's the lead, and Michael Shannon just kind of plays like this guy who's staying in the hotel she's staying in, and he's like the good guy. So it's okay. I mean, it premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival last year, and it just kind of got dumped onto iTunes, and that's where I saw it. So so that's State Like Sleep, and that's a quick review for you guys. Let's get right into this top 10, because this is what this is one of my favorite times of year, because I love looking back at the year that was in film, and it was a pretty good year. I have to say. Did you have trouble coming up with a list at all, Max, or were you?
I didn't really have trouble coming up with a list, but I will say that Riley's list is going to be more of the film critic list, and mine's going to be more of the regular average Joe list. I was very behind in my movies this year, but I think I got a solid list, some solid contenders.
Well, I think that benefits us too, because that kind of covers all spectrums for us.
Right, absolutely.
And the way I kind of approach this list, as I approach it every year, is I do take some objectivity into account. There are some things higher on my list than other movies that I will go back and rewatch more, and we'll explain that when we get there. But ultimately, I don't necessarily... I mean, because if I made a list of my favorite movies, there would be some films on there that I don't think are necessarily the 10 best movies. But, I mean, we'll certainly talk about all of that, because this whole podcast is going to be just really wrapping up 2018 and looking ahead to 2019. So, and I did want to mention real quick, also, Max, and for the listeners, this is going to run a little longer than our more recent podcasts. Lot to cover, so we're going to take our time and kind of dig into things. So, but the thing is I will segment out each individual thing that we're doing. So if you just want to listen to the top 10, you can go into the YouTube description. You can go into the podcast description as well on the various podcast sites, and I will have everything kind of, top 10 starting at 9:30 and then going to whatever. So if you just want to know what our top 10 is, you can just listen to that. Or if you want to know what our biggest surprises are, or disappointments, or if you don't care what the worst movies of the year, stuff like that, you get the picture. So I will clip that stuff out so anybody can listen to whatever individual segment they'd like to. So I think that's a good way to do it. So
absolutely.
So let's go ahead and get right into it. Real quick, we're going to go, because Max mentioned he has seen less than I have. I ended up seeing 144 movies last year that were released. I know, and it's less than what I normally see. Last year I saw 170 movies in 2017.
Jesus God.
So, but no, 144. There was just some stuff that didn't come my way, or I didn't get a chance to travel. There, a lot of the stuff I ended up going to the Twin Cities area to see. And I'm glad I did, because I'm glad I got in a lot of movies. But real quick, I just wanted to mention before we get started, there are a few movies I did not get a chance to see. So I'll give you guys the spoiler alert. I still have not seen If Beale Street Could Talk. I have not seen Can You Ever Forgive Me? Ben is Back, At Eternity's Gate, and then there's a trio of foreign films that I would love to see that I haven't gotten a chance to see, and that's Cold War, the Polish film. Burning, a South Korean film, and Shoplifters, which is a Japanese film. They just haven't quite gotten to where I am right now. So those are the big glaring omissions for me. Obviously, I know Max probably hasn't seen any of those movies, but for me, I've seen all the movies that I've seen. Those are kind of the omissions, the stuff that I wish I would have seen. I'm really excited to see if Beale Street Could Talk. Barry Jenkins' Moonlight was one of my favorites. Was in my top 10 of 2016. So really looking forward to that. So how do you want to start, Max? Do you want me to start, or how do you want to do this?
Well, you can start it. We'll probably shotgun one after another through our 10 through 6, and then take some more time and talk about our 5 through 1, I think.
Yep. So we'll do this with Max and I. I'll do my 10 through 6. Max will do his 10 through 6. Just because I think we'll have more discussions on Max's 10 through 6 than mine. And we won't spend a ton of time on things, and then after we reveal our top 10s, we'll talk about some honorable mentions. I have a lot of them. I was telling Max before I had to do a top 30 to come up with a top 10 because they were just looking through all the movies this year, and there's just so many films that I enjoyed and really, 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 really liked. So, with that said, Max, you ready to do this?
Yeah. What do you got?
All right, let's do this. So, my list starts off with a movie that I was kind of talking about. Putting favorites, there are better movies than this that came out this year that I have in my 11 through 15. However, this movie just really, really hit me, and I really enjoyed this film. My number 10 is Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, the Gus Van Sant film with Joaquin Phoenix. And we'll give a little description, too, of the movies as we go. And then also, Max, if there's something on my 10 through 6 that's higher up on your list, we'll save it and talk about it when it's higher up, so just let me know. But Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot stars Joaquin Phoenix, Jonah Hill, Rooney Mara, and it follows the story of cartoonist John Callahan, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, who's kind of this alcoholic, guy who kind of drifts through life and with no real purpose, and then he gets in a really bad accident with a friend of his who's played by Jack Black. And he ultimately ends up becoming paralyzed. And the movie really, really focuses on John Callahan's, who's a real-life person, really focuses on John Callahan's alcoholism and his struggles with it, and his group meetings that is, the Jonah Hill, who plays his gay therapist type guy. It's like an AA type meeting. And this is really, in my opinion, Jonah Hill's best performance in a movie. I think he's just brilliant in this. He's very sympathetic, very, good. He's really great to watch in this role. And it's another reliably terrific performance as well from Joaquin Phoenix, who really really brings out the heart, the struggle and the pain. And I just really, just based on personal things in my life, I just really resonated with this film and the lead character's struggle with alcoholism. And it's just a really, really terrific movie that, Max, did you get a chance to see that one at all?
I started it and then I fell asleep. I did not get to finish that. It's on my list.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a really, really great film, and I love the way Gus Van Sant sort of shoots the movie. There's a lot of close-ups to really bring out, the emotions and the characters, and that's kind of the big thing. There's a scene in this film that's truly heartbreaking where you hear Joaquin Phoenix sort of talking about, where he's at in his life, and he's not in a good place. And the camera just kind of focuses on Jonah Hill, and Jonah Hill's eyes begin to water. And it's just the facial acting that Jonah Hill does in that scene is just really incredible. And the movie just really hit me. I know critics didn't necessarily love it. It's not showing up on a lot of top 10 lists. That's why I thought I'd mention it here at my number 10. So, yeah, my number 10 is Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. All right, my number 9, then, this is where I got in. I had 9 films in mind that I really, really liked, and so I put them in here. So this is kind of where I was more definitive. I really had like 21 or 20 films vying for my number 10 spot, and I ultimately ended up going with that film by Gus Van Sant. My number 9 is a film that I think people will look back on in 5-10 years and realize they were completely wrong about this movie, and it should have gotten more acclaim than it did. I think people really went into this film and didn't see it for what it was. My number 9 is First Man. Is that, and again, Max, let me know if something's on your list, because I don't know 100% what you've seen, but First Man is, of course, the Neil Armstrong biopic, crucial Neil Armstrong biopic in that phrase. It stars Ryan Gosling, Claire Foy, Corey Stoll, and it's about Neil Armstrong. This film is not about the space race. It's not about it's not about NASA. It's about Neil Armstrong and Damien Chazelle, who directs this movie, who of course directed La La Land and Whiplash. Academy Award-winning director. He does such an excellent job with this movie, really conveying the emotion and the toll that an early, his young daughter's early death plays in his life, and the death that really surrounds Ryan Gosling's character of Neil Armstrong. And you really get to see, and I think Damien Chazelle does a great job of this in sort of showing you what kind of effects that had on Neil Armstrong in their race to go to the moon. I mean, it does highlight the importance of it, while also sort of really paying tribute to this man who was crucial to one of the most incredible moments in American history. And it's a really great performance by Ryan Gosling, very subtle, very nuanced. He does a lot of acting that isn't really showy. He doesn't have these big emotional explosions because he is so sort of numbed by all the death that surrounds him in the stakes of what's at stake here. And Claire Foy is really great. She plays his wife. I think she'll probably get an Oscar nomination for her role in this movie. She's absolutely terrific. Really well directed. The sequences in the moon, if La La Land didn't impress you with Damien Chazelle's efforts as a director, this movie certainly will. Max, did you get a chance to see First Man at all?
I have not seen First Man yet.
Yeah, it's a really, really excellent film, and it's getting a lot of crap. I mean, a lot of people it was boring, it was slow, it was blah, blah, blah. And I think people were expecting Apollo 13 with this movie, right? Like, they're expecting this sort of big action spectacle. The sound design in this movie is incredible. There's one scene in particular where he is in one of the test shuttles, and the sound design, you feel like you're inside the cockpit of this thing, and it's rattling, and you see the despair and all that kind of stuff. And also the sequences shot on the moon near the end of the film are also really, really incredible. So my number 9 is First Man. Anything you wanted to add at all, or Max? Or
no, I just noticed that a couple movies on my list I had the wrong release date for. So I'm scrambling a little bit here.
Sure. Okay, so I'll move on.
I that is on my list, though. I do want to see it.
Yeah,
it's pretty bad.
It should be coming out on digital here, I'm sure, pretty soon. This movie came out back in October, so I just really enjoy the movie, and I think a lot of people are wrong about it. They're welcome to have their opinion, but their opinion is wrong. Max is going to groan because my number 8 is a documentary. This is a film that I have at number 8 that really I didn't know much about. I had heard some really good things. It had popped up on some top 10 lists, and it's on Hulu. So if you guys want to watch this movie, it's on Hulu right now. My number 8 is a documentary called Minding the Gap. This is a really, really powerful, emotional documentary, kind of about the Rust Belt and the effects of, basically fractured homes and things like that on kids. It's directed by a young man named Bing Liu, who sort of portraits his friends. One of whom is a 17-year-old black kid who, and it's also sort of put against their love of skateboarding. So they do a lot of skating and things like that. And there's a couple characters in the film that are, I guess, not characters. It's a documentary. Real life people. There's a couple people it focuses on, and one of them is a 17-year-old. Curie is his name. And he's a young black man in Rockford, Illinois, whose father has passed, and his he didn't grow up in the best of homes. He's got a lot of siblings, and he's really close with his family. He's a really, really, sort of sweet young kid, and he's really struggling, I think, in his life with the effects of a fractured home and the death of his father, and the abuse that some of these kids served. And another character in the film, Zach, who is a little bit older. He's in 22, 23 years old. He struggles with drinking problem because of some of the things that have happened to him in his life. It's really, really emotional, and I love the way, if you're looking at a technical aspect, Bing Liu, who also is involved as well, he made the film because of his, him realizing he had a lot more in common with his friends than he thought, or their stories connected a lot more because they grew up in homes where their mother was being beaten or the kids were being beaten and stuff like that. So it's it's not a super uplifting documentary, but it's a really interesting one, and it sort of follows these kids growing up in sort of this kind of fractured, almost crazy empty town of Rockford, Illinois, that just really feels like middle America just being depleted due to the recession, in 2008, and the various policies that are kind of in place in our country that sort of keep people impoverished and in the poverty line and that kind of thing. So there's a really great scene at the end of the movie where this cure goes to his father's grave, and he can't find his father's grave, so he gets upset, and the camera, Bing Liu sort of focuses the camera on this young man, and it's just really heartbreaking to watch. You can see every emotion sort of going through his head, from anger to sort of acceptance to love, because ultimately, he has some bad memories of his dad, but he ultimately sort of reconciles that was his dad, and his dad was who he was, and when his dad was his dad, it was great, and when he was sort of an asshole and was beating his mom and hitting the kids and stuff like that, things weren't great. But it's just a really, really well done film, and I was really impressed on how it was made by this young man. So my number 8 was Minding the Gap. Any thoughts on that, Max, or anything you want to?
I honestly have not heard of that one.
Okay.
Minding the Gap.
Yep, it's really great. Okay, my number 7 then is something I think you'll probably have on your list. My number 7 is Black Klansman.
I have that a little higher.
Okay, so you want to wait to talk about that one?
Yeah, let's hold off on that one.
Okay, and then so my number 6 then is Armando Iannucci's brilliant political satire, The Death of Stalin.
Ah, yes.
This movie was, I guess, if you want to go here, it was, I guess, a 2017 film because it released in the film festivals, but this movie didn't get a theatrical release until March of this year. And the movie has an excellent cast. It's a political satire in the vein of like Dr. Strangelove, which is funny because when I first saw this film, I watched this and then I thought, I need to watch Dr. Strangelove. And so I watched this and Dr. Strangelove back to back, and what a great double feature. This movie is so funny. It is such a sharp political satire. Its story is really interesting. It's basically American actors playing real Russian people, or British actors. Like Jason Isaacs plays like one of the big Russian generals, but nobody's talking in Russian, and Steve Buscemi is being Steve Buscemi. It's really fantastic. It's super funny. It's got some really great political satire in it. Really, really hilarious moments. Armando Iannucci, if you're not familiar with him, he's been doing sort of these political satires his whole career, really. He made films like In the Loop. He heavily involved in the HBO series Veep. I believe I thought he co-wrote Birdman, but I think I'm wrong on that. But anyway, The Death of Stalin is just kind of this really, really funny, really sharp, edgy, political, feel like I keep repeating myself, but I don't know really what else to say about it other than, because I don't want to ruin this one because there's just some really great gags. A lot of comedies, you want to talk about the stuff that's really interesting, really funny. Yes, he does. Stalin does die. But it's also darkly humor, and this movie comes out at a time where I think it's more poignant than ever. So, he paints, it's sort of like the movie Vice, Adam McKay's movie Vice, but I think this is done better than Vice, wherein these characters are monsters, really, but Armando Iannucci really finds the way of making them look like idiots, and it's hysterical. And that's kind of the thing, like, they don't really ever shy away from how monstrous these characters are, or these people are, but still they find the humor and things like that. And I think it's just a really creative, well-done structure to this film. And I can't recommend this one highly enough. Obviously, it's in my top 10. It's number 6. But it's crude. It's one of my favorite movies of the year. One of my favorite political satires ever. And there's a lot of great ones. So that wraps up my 10 through 6. My number 6 is The Death of Stalin. So I turn it over to you now.
Also, I did see Death of Stalin. It is a weird little movie. It's definitely odd, but it's very well acted.
Yeah. You did get a chance to see it.
Enjoyed it. I did see that. Yes.
I
did enjoy that. Okay, so like I said, I'm kind of more the average Joe top 10 here, but I think I got some solid films in here. They may even be one or two surprises for Riley here.
Sure.
Number 10 is probably not something Riley would put on the caliber of his top 10, but for me it was incredibly enjoyable, and it was a movie that was released during kind of the movie dump in February, where movies that are probably going to underperform or not play very well are generally dumped, and it is Game Night.
Yes.
Very enjoyable. Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams, basically a group of friends whose game night turns into a real life adventure mystery. Obviously, the fantastic Jesse Plemons plays the creepy neighbor.
He's so good.
Jesse Plemons, I remember watching him in Friday Night Lights, and his career has taken off. And yeah, he's hilarious. But Kyle Chandler from Friday Night Lights is also in there, but it's just one of those movies. It's really enjoyable. Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams are fantastic, as well as I said, Jesse Plemons. But it just kind of works. When I first saw the trailer and stuff, I thought it might be kind of a campy, cliched movie, but it was a pretty fresh take, and it was really enjoyable, I thought.
Yeah,
I was a big fan.
It's hilarious. It's one of my favorite comedies. It's actually probably my favorite studio comedy of the year, because I would consider Death of Stalin a comedy. But as far as like the bigger studio comedies go, I think it's fantastic, and I was really surprised as well. It isn't on my top 10, but it is one of my favorite movies of the year for sure. So.
Yeah, I thought it was one of those ones that you weren't necessarily busting out laughing, but you kind of had a smile on the whole face,
There are some genuinely laugh out loud moments in this film.
Oh, so. I agree completely. Yeah, so awesome. Game Night, number 10. Number 9, I have a movie that personally, it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. I thought some of the pacing was a little jarred, and the story was kind of weak, but the action was fantastic. The storyline was fairly fresh, I would say. Definitely something we have not seen in a long time. That is number 9, Overlord. Okay,
that's not on my list. I did see this, though, after you had saw it and recommended it, but I enjoyed it. But go ahead.
I like it. It was produced by J.J. Abrams. Not a lot of well-known actors in there, but no. It's basically these American soldiers who are dropped behind enemy lines on D-Day and discover secret Nazi experiments on humans, and it's basically Band of Brothers zombies.
Yeah, that's pretty valid, actually.
Without spoiling anything, but I thought it was a fresh take on kind of the World War II zombie genre. It wasn't stupid zombies like The Walking Dead, where it's just repetitive and stupid. I thought it was a pretty fresh take. They had good action sequences, some important climaxes in the movie that you're kind of on the edge of your seat. And
right.
I thought overall it's one of those movies. It's enjoyable. It's a fresh story. It's got World War II. It's got zombies. Well acted. I'm trying to find the name. I think it's Pilu Asbeck. He's German. He's in Game of Thrones as well. He's Euron Greyjoy.
Is that the Nazi general or colonel or whatever he is?
Yeah, the captain or whatever. Yeah, he's one of the main characters.
Yeah, he's great.
He gives a really good performance. He's Euron Greyjoy in Game of Thrones. A lot of Game of Thrones talk here so far.
I like Wyatt Russell in this as well. I think what I like about Wyatt Russell in this is he's really channeling his father. I mean, he's Kurt Russell in this movie. He's like 80s, early 90s Kurt Russell. It's great.
I agree completely. Yeah, it's and you got some new actors in there. I thought Jovan Adepo is fantastic, and there's, like I said, it's kind of an unknown cast, but it comes together well.
It's balls to the wall, super fun action. It's something I'd watch again for sure. Not on my top. I have ranked my top 30, so I can, if we have something that crossover, I can kind of tell you where I would place it. Overlord is not in my top 30, but a movie that I found really enjoyable. Doesn't
surprise me, but yeah, it's just one of those things. I just Yeah, it's really enjoyable. If you just want to see a movie, veg out, drink a beer, eat some pizza, Overlord is a perfect movie.
It is. It really is.
Now, sneaking into my top 10 at number 8 is a movie I'm putting on here purely because of how enjoyable it was. And I will say I've never read the book, but from everything I've read, it is a pretty faithful adaptation of the book. And I think it's a solid script. It's not too cliched. It's got solid action. At number 8, I've got Ready Player One.
Loved this movie. Not in my top 30, but I loved this movie. Go ahead. Directed by
Steven Spielberg. You got Ty Sheridan, Olivia Cooke, Ben Mendelsohn, who is a fantastic villain as of late. Lena Waithe, T.J. Miller, Simon Pegg, and Mark Rylance. This actually has a pretty star-studded cast. And the big concern for people was coming from the well-known book is that it was, like a lot of these adaptations, was not going to be very good. But the CGI was fantastic. I thought the storyline was solid, and I certainly didn't see the plot twist at the end coming, personally. And I just thought it was a very enjoyable movie. That the pacing was good. It was fairly nonstop action. It kind of made you think a little bit, but just a really, really enjoyable movie that kind of touched on kind of where society's going. Yeah. Well, no one, everybody hates and we're destroying the earth, so now they got to put on these, virtual reality goggles, and that's where everybody lives now.
Yeah, for sure.
But I love Ty Sheridan and Ben Mendelsohn. Last couple years, been in Star Wars. I mean, he's a terrific villain. He's outdone himself. So I'd like to see him continue to get roles like that. He's also going to be in Captain Marvel.
Yep.
I'm not sure what his role is going to be in Captain Marvel. But
I think he's playing like one of the Kree soldiers or something like that. I don't know if he's the main villain. He might be the main villain in the movie. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, he's one of my favorite actors. He's also the villain
he was also the villain in the Dark Knight Rises as well.
And he's also just a really great actor. I mean, you watch the Netflix show Bloodline, which the first season that's really good. He's excellent in that. But there's a really small movie I always talk about with him, and it's called Mississippi Grind, which he is brilliant in with him and Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
He's fantastic in that. So
he is going to be the main villain in Captain Marvel. He is going to be Talos.
Yep.
So
cool. Great choice. That's an excellent choice.
And I feel like that's a movie that's kind of underrated because it came out early. I think it was in March, and it got good reception. But like anything else, you had the obsessive fans that wanted to nitpick every little thing. But this is another good Friday night beer and pizza movie. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
Well acted. It's pretty solid overall, I think.
I gave this movie, so fresh for me is anything that's B- or above. So I gave this movie a B+. I do have one nitpick about this movie that kind of it didn't bug me at all, but I the more I thought about it, the more it kind of bugged me a little bit. This movie takes place in 2030, right? 2030, 2040?
2045.
2045?
Yep.
Everything that they do in that movie is based on 80s and 90s nostalgia, and it seems odd that nothing would have come out that's iconic between now and 2045. I understand the book was written I want to say the book was written in the 90s, maybe 80s. I can't remember.
Well, I think that's kind of the disagreement you and I had about the Hunger Games is the movie. You're between a rock and a hard place because you invent your own stuff, you add that in there, and then people crucify you for not staying faithful to the book. But if they stay faithful to the book, then you're limited to the confines of what the book entails, which is the 80s, 90s nostalgia, which I will say was very cool.
It is it's awesome.
They worked in there was cool.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm putting the movie down. I just thought it was funny that the book doesn't include anything that happened between the 80s and 2045. Yeah,
right. Any new games or anything.
It didn't bug me. I love this movie. I'm a Spielberg apologist noted. So when people started bitching about this movie, I came to the movie's defense right away. I love this movie. It's an excellent choice. So I'm glad it's on your list.
Excellent. Coming in at number 7, and I'll be honest, this is a weird movie. It's not your typical movie.
Right.
It's an anthology film, and Riley can probably guess what it is. It's just the way everything works together on it. It just works. You've got a really, really powerful cast. Tim Blake Nelson, Liam Neeson, James Franco, Brendan Gleeson, Zoe Kazan, Tyne Daly, Harry Melling, Tom Waits. And it's basically six little short films almost. This is, of course, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. You've got The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Near Algodones, Meal Ticket, All Gold Canyon, The Gal Who Got Rattled, and The Mortal Remains. The acting that stood out to me, not necessarily the acting, but just kind of the scene, was with James Franco. I thought that was
yes.
It's very subdued, but at the same time, it's just it's just so funny just to see him kind of subdued like that. And I was a big fan of this movie. Basically, they just tell 6 different tales, and it's like I said, it is kind of weird. It's not your normal movie, but it just the Coen brothers are obviously fantastic. Some of the best filmmakers out there.
What's your favorite of the little vignettes, though?
I would say probably and I don't know how to pronounce it, but the Near Algodones. Yeah, Algodones. But the first 2 I think were my favorite, because the one with Buster Scruggs, just the way the dude is like, her.
Yeah.
I'm a gunslinger.
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the first segment, not the, because the movie's called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, so the first segment's called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and that segment of the movie has one of the most creative deaths in a movie I think I have ever seen, and I rewound it probably 6 times to see it, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, because it is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just Liam Neeson's in it, in the Meal Ticket,
and that's probably my least favorite one, to be honest with you.
I wasn't a big fan of that one. It was very slow.
I understand what they were going for with it, with the sort of message of Liam Neeson basically, like, I mean, it's called Meal Ticket, and the guy doing the whatever you want to call it, I can't, the plays or monologues or whatever.
Yeah, Ozymandias.
He does Ozymandias. He does like some Shakespeare stuff. He does like the Gettysburg Address, and like he does like the preamble of the Constitution. Dude, it's so weird. But then Liam Neeson is just he's just trying to survive, and I understand that part of it. I honestly think my favorite one in this movie is the last one. Because I think it ties all the themes of the first 5 together, and it's so interesting, the dialogue that it's brilliant dialogue that they wrote for The Mortal Remains is my favorite. But they're all great. I should mention this is my number 12, so I'm right there with you. This is my number 12 on my top 30. So it didn't quite crack it, but I think it lends itself really well to repeat viewings, because you can go back and watch the segments that you love.
Right,
and you can, we can go back and watch Meal Ticket again and see if there's something that we missed maybe the first time, which is so prevalent in Coen Brothers films. So,
and I think that's definitely a movie I'm open to rewatching. And the National Board of Review did name this one of his top 10 best films of 2018.
Yep.
Wow. So, and it's worth noting that I don't know, was it produced by Netflix? I know that it was released on Netflix. Immediately following a limited theatrical release.
So this movie was originally...
it's an Annapurna. It is an Annapurna movie.
Yep. So this was originally supposed to be a mini-series. Just a normal mini-series. And these were all these vignettes that the Coen brothers made were originally supposed to be like 40 to 50 minutes long. And it was going to be like, I can't think of any examples right now, but there are anthology series out there.
Sure.
Black Mirror and stuff like that. It was originally intended to be a mini-series. And then I think the Coen brothers decided they wanted to just turn this into a film. And you're right, it was picked up by Netflix. It was always at Netflix, I believe, and Annapurna was involved. And they ended up ultimately just deciding to go with these sort of short vignettes. I love Tom Waits, too, in All Gold Canyon as the prospector. I think that's a really great example of not needing a ton of dialogue to tell a really interesting story. Because there's hardly, I don't think, is there any dialogue in that sequence? I don't know if there, there is some, I think, at the end.
Not much.
He's muttering to himself, but I think ultimately there isn't that much dialogue, but that's just a great example of telling a wonderful story with little to no dialogue, so.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Solid movie, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
It's fantastic.
Check it out. My number 7 in the final of my
number
my
6, right?
Oh, we're going through. Or yeah, excuse me. Yes, number 6.
Okay.
Final of my 10 through 6. Like Riley, I chose a documentary. I think this is an important film that is needed more than ever at this time in the world, and especially with the state of the United States. And it's about someone who, really at the core, was just a nice person. And of course, this is "Won't You Be My Neighbor" about Mr. Rogers. This movie, we'll get to it a little later, but this movie did surprise me. I put off seeing it for a while because I figured, well, it's just a documentary about Mr. Rogers, but fantastic film. This is the highest grossing biographical documentary of all time. Mm-hmm. Side note, but what I thought was really important about it is it showed the relationships that Fred Rogers had with people, and like something to me that I thought was very important was people would say things like, Fred Rogers was gay, he was this and that, and you talk to people that worked with him, and a number of guys that worked with him are this and that, and they said, no, or he was, he was married, but he had these other this other life, and all these people that know him, they said, no, that's who he was who he was.
Yeah, they were looking for something wrong.
Right, they were looking for something wrong with him, and there wasn't. And I mean, there's some big hitters in there. Obviously, they have Joan Rogers, his widow, his sons John, Jim, his sister Elaine. But for example, Yo-Yo Ma is in there. He knew Fred Rogers really well, and it talks to a lot of the kids that someone as famous as Fred never had no business talking to or whatever. He could have been that elite star that just put on this children's program, but he did it because he cared and he wanted to bring some good into the world. Mm-hmm. And he went before Congress many, many times, stumping for PBS, the public broadcasting, and appropriate programming. And it really just shows the kindness of Fred Rogers and stuff that we really do need in the world today. But is a success in the box office, critical response. I believe Rotten Tomatoes, which take with a grain of salt, but has 99%. I think it's an honest look at the life of Fred Rogers. It's not, I don't think they pull any punches. I just don't think there's any punches to be had.
Right.
So I really like that. Won't You Be My Neighbor about Fred Rogers. I thought it was a fantastic documentary. Won a slew of awards, but I think it has a really, really powerful message in it, I think.
This is my number 16.
Okay.
I at the end of this film, I was just touched, I think is the right word to do, just to how impactful Fred Rogers was. And I think, if you look at the documentary, like you talked about, Max, people were looking for something wrong. I think the only blemish on his life was that he told one of the members of the cast, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't hang out at gay bars. And that was the only thing. But he was a deeply religious man.
And he addressed it, though. Yeah, he addressed it. And the guy said he never felt any real judgment or anything. Right. Fred wasn't saying it in a malicious way.
He wasn't telling him he couldn't be gay. But yeah,
right.
and really, what was so interesting to me about this movie, I cried at the end of this movie just because of how touching and my thing was just he was so good at tackling things, really, really heavy things, but making them seem accessible and putting them in a way that you could understand them. There's a scene in this movie
that a child could understand.
Correct. There's a scene in this movie where he is sitting down. It's from the show, obviously, but it's highlighted where he is sitting in the pool with this gay guy, the black gentleman who played the mailman, whose name escaped me, and I wish it didn't. Was Clarence the character's name? Maybe I can't remember.
It was.
But his
Francois Clemens.
Yes, Yep, that's right.
He was Officer Clemens. Yeah.
Yep. So there's this really touching moment in this film where they highlight a scene where there had been some there racial sensitivity and things like that, and he shows. He made it as simple as, look. You can put your feet in my pool. It's a hot day. We're hanging out in this little pool, and the camera just focuses on a set of black feet and a set of white feet, and it's just Fred Rogers and him. And it's such a simple message, but it's so powerful because of the type of person that Fred Rogers was. And yeah, you're right, Max. This is an excellent documentary. I really, really enjoyed it. I wish I would have been able to get to the theater and see it, but I didn't ultimately end up seeing it. And yeah, I just thought it was great. So that's an excellent choice for your number 6.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's something the world needs more of. So
absolutely, especially now.
I liked it.
Okay, so that was Max's 10 through 6. We'll go to my 5. So we'll do one apiece here. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then after we reveal our number 1s, we'll talk about our honorable mentions. My number 5 is a really, really small film from a director who's been working for a while, whose films I really enjoy. It has a great cast. Just 2 movies in a row on my list that have Steve Buscemi in them. My number 5 is a film called Lean on Pete. This is a movie about a young boy played by Charlie Plummer, named Charlie in the movie. His name is Charlie. And he kind of grows up with a dad who doesn't really pay much attention to him. And he just sort of drifts in and out of Charlie's life. And Charlie goes and gets a job with a horse trainer played by Steve Buscemi. And he ultimately, kind of develops he falls in love, obviously not like romantically in love, but he gets really attached to this horse whose name is Lean on Pete. It's a racehorse, and ultimately he ends up kind of taking this horse because it can't race anymore, and he sort of takes it around the country on this sort of he steals it. He steals the horse. I mean, to be blatant, and it's really just a beautiful, beautiful film. And I was sort of just enraptured by the performances. Charlie Plummer is fantastic in this movie. You would know him. I just wasn't super prepared for this. I apologize. He plays the young Gotti son in All the Money in the World. So I mean, he's kind of an up and coming actor. Chloe Sevigny, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, is also in this. Steve Zahn is in the film, and it's really just a sweet, almost like a coming of age story. That's really, to me, I don't know much else to say about it other than it's just a really great film. I don't want to talk too much about some of these movies that we're getting into now because I don't want to spoil them if people haven't seen them or say too much about them. That's going to ruin it. But this is really just a brilliant showcase for this young actor, Charlie Plummer, who I think is going to be a talent to watch in the future. And it's just a really sweet, sort of endearing movie. So yeah, that's my number 5, Lean on Pete. I think it's streaming right now on Amazon Prime. So if you want to watch the movie out there, it's streaming. So definitely check this one out if you get a chance. It's nice and short. Actually, no, it's not. This one's like 2 hours long. But I thought it was a shorter film. I was thinking something different. But yeah, it's just a kid who loves the horse who's going to get killed. He doesn't want the horse to get killed just because it's a racehorse. So he steals it and kind of goes on an adventure. So it's also kind
classic Glue Factory story.
Yeah, but he also sort of kind of accepts, where he's at in his life and what he ultimately wants to do, and he's kind of a lost kid. So it's a really interesting story. So, yeah. All right, what's your number 5?
Excellent choice. My number 5 is a movie that divided critics.
Uh-oh.
People either loved it or they hated it. Riley can probably figure out what this one was.
There's a lot of those this year.
Obviously, I was in the camp. I really liked it. I thought the acting was fantastic. It was a little one-sided, but I think there's a scene at the end that kind of addresses that. I thought it was funny. There was some whitewashing of some topics that certainly happened, but my number 5 pick is the Adam McKay bio-comedy drama Vice.
Oh, you did see Vice.
I did.
Oh, awesome! Yep. This is not on my list, but I want you to talk about it first because I'm so happy you saw this movie and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I really like Vice. So first of all, Christian Bale, amazing performance. Riley and I talked about this. He said, "Well, Christian Bale is going to be Dick Cheney," and I said, "There's no way. There is no way that he's going to be able to look like Dick Cheney at all." And Christian Bale looks just like Dick Cheney.
He does.
Amy Adams plays Lynn Cheney. Steve Carell, who I guess I didn't even realize was in the film, plays Donald Rumsfeld. Sam Rockwell plays George W. Bush, who's, in there a little bit. Allison Pill, Lily Rabe, play his daughters. Sure. And out of left field, Tyler Perry as Colin Powell.
And he's great.
He's great as Colin Powell. Did not expect that, but basically it follows Dick Cheney from his times, from his younger years, and kind of how he worked his way up. There's an interesting little mini credits in the middle of the movie, which I personally thought was brilliant.
I thought it was so funny.
I thought that was funny.
I laughed out loud when that happened.
So did I. I thought it was great. So it's another Annapurna movie. I really liked it because it shows a side of politics that really hasn't been seen except in maybe TV series like House of Cards or something like that. Kind of the inner workings. I think the scene of Dick Cheney, young Dick Cheney with the young Donald Rumsfeld, while Nixon is in there with Henry Kissinger, is super important because this really isn't a spoiler, but basically Rumsfeld tells Cheney, the discussion they're having in that room 5 feet away from us, in a week is going to lead to 100 people dying in a foreign country, thousands of miles away, and you're reminded of how few people have that kind of power, which really forms the basis for Dick Cheney throughout his ascent, really to the top of the American political race, if you will. And I think you think of someone like Francis Underwood in House of Cards. Okay, you watch that and you think, wow, this guy's pretty bad. Thank God that kind of shit doesn't happen in real life. And then you watch this movie, that we know of, and you watch this movie and you're like, oh, huh. The one thing I didn't like, and it didn't really occur to me until after I read some reviews of it, but it does kind of whitewash George W. Bush's involvement in a lot of these things. It makes it seem like Dick Cheney was running everything.
Yeah.
In reality, that was calculated, but George W. Bush is definitely responsible for a lot of these things. But
it sort of makes Bush look like a stooge almost, too.
Right.
That's not to take anything away from Rockwell's portrayal, because I think it's the best Bush on screen that we've ever seen. But you're right. Yeah, that was the problem that I had as well, is that it definitely does make Bush seem like he was just like, and I'm just going through life. And no. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and I think that it's really interesting because it didn't show Cheney as someone that wanted to be the president, that wanted to do this, but he was someone that wanted power.
Yes.
And when he saw an opportunity to seize power,
because of Lynn Cheney,
he did.
Which is the most interesting part of the movie to me.
Yes, I thought the whole thing with Lynn Cheney's mother and father, which I won't say any spoilers there, but was really, really interesting. Something I didn't know. I think one of the other biggest sins of the movie, and I realize they probably couldn't have fit it in there, but was Cheney's involvement with Halliburton.
Yeah.
Really, the first introduction the world had to Dick Cheney, in a practical sense, was the Gulf War. The Persian Gulf War, when he was running Halliburton. There's obviously a lot of backstory with Dick Cheney and Halliburton, and some of it is addressed after Cheney's vice president, with some of the nefarious dealings he had and that kind of thing. But I think it's a very well acted movie. I personally liked the way McKay shot it. I didn't have a problem with the cuts and that kind of thing.
I thought it was brilliant.
I was okay with that. Yeah, I didn't have some people have problems with the pacing and that kind of thing, and I think there's a scene at the end that really, because of course the first thing people are going to say, well, it has a liberal bias, of course, it's talking about a Republican vice president and this and that, but I think the movie makes a good point that nothing they said in there was not factual or vetted.
Yeah.
Otherwise they would have gotten sued. So everything you see is factual, and in the moments like in the Cheney household where they don't know what has been said, they're upfront about it.
Yeah, and there's that great scene where they recite Shakespeare dialogue.
Yes.
Because that's how he was viewed. I'm so happy you put this on your list. This is my thing, and this also kind of goes in with the fact that I saw a lot of movies this year. This is my number 30, but I think the more I watch this movie, the more it's going to rise up this list. Vice to me is a smart movie. I thought Adam McKay did a fantastic job with this. I don't think it's nearly as good as The Big Short. That's not a fair comparison. They're two totally different movies to some degree. I should say to some degree because I mean you see scenes like with Alfred Molina's scene in the restaurant is very Big Short-esque because he's basically reading. I thought that scene was brilliant.
Yep.
But you're right. I think for me right now, the two gripes that we talked about, the thing with Bush and the thing you mentioned with Halliburton, I think bugs me. But also, I have a hard time saying that they should have made the film different because I'm not the filmmaker. So I have a problem with people who say that, well, it's not the movie I wanted. I think the criticisms of this movie are stupid. Honestly, I think the people who say things like, I'm not ready to laugh about those years yet, it's not really that funny. There are funny moments in it because Adam McKay is a comedy guy. He has a comedy background. I didn't laugh consistently throughout the movie. I thought there were stylistic choices I thought that were funny. Like you mentioned the mid-credits, the scene in the where they roll the credits because that's just funny. And I think people also are saying that this lionizes Dick Cheney, and I don't see that at all. I think it's the opposite, actually. I think it's a very scathing, sort of searing look at his life. But I think, to me, the other thing I really don't like about this film is the framing device of the film with the narration from Jesse Plemons. I didn't care for that, and I didn't care for how that paid off. I thought that was a little gimmicky. But it's something that I appreciated for sure because I like the narration that he does. Because it is, like The Big Short.
Right.
Ultimately, like I said, I think this movie is only going to move up my list as time goes on because I have only seen it the one time. But I'm so happy that you saw this and we can talk about it because I really did enjoy this film and I thought it was fantastic. I am a little upset though because I did find out afterwards. You ever sit through a movie and it was so engaging to me that I didn't want to leave. I had to piss the entire time during this movie. And so when the credits roll, I left and found out later there's a mid-credit scene. Did you stay for that?
Yes.
I heard it.
Yes, I thought that was
it?
that's the scene I'm talking about that kind of gives them not excuses the movie, but basically it's the focus group.
Yeah.
And it, I guess, spoiler ahead. I guess if it's not a major spoiler, but it is kind of a spoiler. But basically, they're sitting in the focus group, and they said, "Does anyone have anything to say?" And the dude in the Buccaneers jersey is like, "Well, yeah, this is just such a liberal bias movie." And then the other guy goes, "Well, but they fact checked everything.
Yeah,
it's actually the guy from Westworld, one of the surgeons.
Okay.
The not Asian one.
Gotcha.
Is the easiest way for me to describe it. But he's like, but they fact checked everything, and the guy goes, "That's what a libtard would say."
Yeah.
And he goes, "So because they researched everything and fact checked it, it makes it a liberal bias." And then they fight, and then the woman's like, "Can we get some people in here?" And the movie ends. But I just thought it was clever the way they did that,
Yeah.
because inevitably people are going to say that, but like they said, and like I mentioned earlier, they fact checked everything in that movie's been fact checked.
Yeah,
it's real.
And The Big Short is one of the most accurate movies that has come out recently. But
yeah.
And the only reason I came across that mid-credits thing is because there was an article that was written, I believe it was on Vox, and it was about how, and the critic at Vox didn't like the movie, if you keep that in mind. He didn't like the film.
Right.
But he also said that the mid-credit scene makes a bad film worse, and I get that criticism because I do think because I did read the description of the scene before this, I read it the other day. And I do think it is Adam McKay assuming his audience. I think this movie is not for... This movie is for people our age. I mean, we're a little bit more in tune with the stuff like this, but I think this movie is for 18 to 35-year-olds who were kids, not necessarily kids, but younger during the Bush years who didn't know this stuff. And you get these 50 and 60-year-old or 40, 50, 60-year-old critics who say, "Well, they didn't tell me anything I didn't know." Okay, well, the movie's not for you. The movie is for... so I think it's smart that Adam McKay knew his audience. And one other thing I just wanted to mention about this movie is Amy Adams is fantastic in this movie. And I think she is really the core of this film because if you watch this movie, and this is Dick Cheney's story, Lynn Cheney is the reason he is what he is. Because the movie sort of portrays accurately or not accurately, Dick Cheney, as in his younger years, is sort of this alcoholic working. He was a linesman. He was working on electrical power lines in Wyoming. And
which I also think is funny because I didn't realize he's from Casper, Wyoming. That's very close to where I live now. It's a couple hours south of Billings here.
Yeah, and so like that framing device of Lynn Cheney being like, I can't do this. I can't be powerful because I'm a woman. You have to do this for me. And so it really kind of paints that picture of whoever Lynn Cheney married would have become Dick Cheney. Really, I mean, so that's the most fascinating part about it for me, is that Cheney was content to just kind of, if you believe the movie and if the movie's accurate, he seems at the beginning of the film to just be content about where he's at. He's a stumbling drunk, getting in bar fights, and then Lynn Cheney says, "Hey, shit or get off the pot, or you're not going to be with me."
Yeah, I agree. I think the movie plays down a little bit. How smart Dick Cheney is, though.
Oh, no, that's not what I meant.
They make him seem like he's a stumbling bumbler. I mean, he had a BA and an MA in political science from Yale and the University of Wyoming. I mean, he's a very intelligent person. I think that she definitely nudged him in the right direction. I think it's interesting, though, because, there's a scene with his, with his daughter and stuff, and I think that holds the last vestige of, well, maybe he's not the monster, we all thought he was. He's still protecting his family, and then at the end you realize he'll do anything for power.
Well, and I think the only way this movie lionizes Dick Cheney in a fair way is that he obviously was a good father. I mean, he cares about his kids. I mean, he wasn't willing, for the most part, until the very end, wasn't willing to stoop to the level that people wanted him to stoop to it and denounce his daughter, who of course is a lesbian. If you know anything about Dick Cheney, and I thought that was covered really well in the film. But that doesn't make me feel sympathy for who Dick Cheney is as a person. But I thought that was an interesting touch to add to the film, is that he obviously cared about his kids. He's a good dad.
I think really just shows that he's a smart person.
Yeah.
I mean, just because he did things that were obviously terrible, it doesn't make him a not smart person. I mean, the good Jack. I mean, if you really want to think about it, he's a genius.
Yeah. And one last thing,
he's the only vice. I was going to say he's the only vice president in history to ever have power like that.
And the thing is that this isn't this isn't just. I mean, yes, they rolled back the unitary. It heavily focuses on unitary executive theory, wherein if the president does it, it's not a crime. Is basically, and it's explained better in the film because they did the research and things like that. No president since Bush has rolled this back. Obama didn't roll it back. Trump certainly isn't going to roll it back. So I was listening to I try not to I guess there's more than one film podcast. I know there's a lot of podcasters that don't like to promote other people's things, but I was listening to Sean Fennessy in The Big Picture. I don't know if you listened to the Ringer's movie podcast, The Big Picture, with Sean Fennessy, but he interviewed Adam McKay, and Adam McKay looked at it and said, I don't know why Republicans would be mad about this. They won. And that's what's so interesting about the movie is that they succeeded in what they wanted to do. Dick Cheney succeeded in what he wanted to do in rolling back the unitary executive theory. So, and giving the president more power and giving the vice president more power. So I thought it's a fantastic film. The performances are astounding. I think if Christian Bale, I don't know if he'll win necessarily. We'll talk about that going forward in a later segment on this podcast. Because I don't want to spend much more time on this. Obviously, we're spending more time. I did have one other point I was going to say about this film, and I can't remember what it was. So we'll just move on. But I'm so glad this made your list. And like I said, just because of the sheer magnitude of movies I saw this year, it didn't crack my top 10. But I really enjoyed this film, and I think it's going to age really, really well. So
I would agree.
All right,
Riley, what do you have? What are you on, number 4?
I'm on my number 4, yeah. And we're not going to spend time on this because for those of you who haven't seen it, I don't want to even bring anything else up. My number 4 is another documentary that flat out, straight up blew me away. It's my favorite documentary of the year. I don't think it'll win the Oscar. I think it'll be nominated for an Oscar. The movie is Three Identical Strangers. And this is a film. All I'm going to say about this, because I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this, like I said, because it's so interesting. You just need to watch it. The movie follows 3 twins who find out they were separated at birth via adoption, and they reunite. And that's all I'm going to say. Did you see this, Max?
I've heard about it, but I didn't. I didn't know how good it was going to be. But if you really like it, I'll definitely.
I don't. We try not to. We try to keep the show fairly cursing free. But this movie is fucking brilliant. It is fucking brilliant. I love this movie, and the story is so interesting. It is going to inspire debates among people. It already has. It's one of the best reviewed movies of the year to go along with Won't You Be My Neighbor and Minding the Gap as well. I think those are 3 documentaries that will get Oscar nominations, which we'll cover in a future podcast probably as that time approaches. But my number 4, I'm going to leave it at that, is 3 Identical Strangers. So, Max, what's your number 4?
Coming in at number 4 is a movie I quite enjoyed, directed by a director who's known for pushing the envelope, and I think does it very successfully. It includes a wonderful performance from a number of actors, John David Washington, Adam Driver, Laura Harrier, Topher Grace. It is Black Klansman.
Okay, so this is the one that this was my number 7, just in case anybody.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Just right off the bat, John David Washington is fantastic, but I was blown away by Adam Driver's performance.
He's amazing.
Adam Driver was amazing. Basically, so John David Washington, for those of you that are a fan of HBO's series Ballers, he plays Ricky Jarrett. He plays Ron Stallworth, the first black police officer in Colorado Springs. Basically, he starts experiencing racism, and this is a true story, by the way. And then he goes to cover a Black Panther rally, and ends up going undercover with the KKK, but the problem is they've got to do face-to-face meetings. And the KKK would recognize, obviously, a black man. So Adam Driver's character, the Jewish detective, Flip Zimmerman, acts as him in order to meet the Ku Klux Klan. So Ron Stallworth talks to the KKK on the phone, and Flip Zimmerman actually meets them. Topher Grace is fantastic as David Duke, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and does all this stuff, and then they get involved with the local KKK guys, and there's definitely some tense moments there. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a really good movie. It's really well acted. It's a true story, and it's a gut punch at the end. I think we talked about that earlier, but yeah, at the end of the movie it's a gut punch because you're like, all right, things are getting better, and then you're like, and they're gone.
Yeah,
it's yeah.
Like I mentioned, this was my number 7. I love this movie. I have not got a chance to go back and revisit it. I really want to, but you're right. It's got a trio of really great performances from Laura Harrier, John David Washington, and Adam Driver. Adam Driver is going to be somebody who's going to be a perennial Oscar contender, probably this dude is just so talented. He's just so good at sort of capturing this moment. And I think the movie really turns for me when I first saw this film. I think Black Klansman really turns for me when you see, Adam Driver kind of like, well, this is your thing. This is your crusade when he's talking to John David Washington. But then he starts to sort of realize the magnitude of the hatefulness of the KKK. That isn't just about blacks. It's Jews and it's Mexicans and it's anybody that isn't basically a white Anglo-Saxon, Catholic, Christian, whatever, male person.
Right.
And I think just that realization that Adam Driver's character comes to is just really astounding to watch. And yeah, Spike Lee, who I don't know if you mentioned that it was Spike Lee or not, but I'll mention it again. Spike Lee directs this movie, and you're right, he does push the envelope. I think this is probably, outside of maybe something like Inside Man, I'm a big Spike Lee fan, but I think outside of Inside Man, this is probably his most accessible film that you could watch. I mean, Do the Right Thing is an odd movie.
I don't think it's one of his more controversial films. I mean, it's a fact.
Yeah.
Although I will say that Flip Zimmerman is not a real person.
Correct.
Due to his face-to-face interaction with the Klan, they're obviously not going to reveal who he actually is. The actual events occurred in 1979, and they actually got pretty high up into the KKK. Well,
and the script does such a fantastic job of really sort of pulling Ron Stallworth in two directions. I mean, he does have he has the romantic relationship with Laura Harrier's character. and he's a cop, which is directly conflicting with Laura Harrier's beliefs and things like that. So I think the way the movie kind of pushes and pulls that relationship is really great. This is a Best Picture nominee for sure. I'd be shocked. And I also think, you can talk about, which I'm sure we will eventually. We'll talk about people like Bradley Cooper and things like that. I think this is the film that the Academy is going to give Spike Lee a Best Director trophy. That's way long overdue, if you ask me. Because like I said, I think this is the most accessible film. And Spike really kind of tones everything. It is out there in terms of well, I guess not really out there isn't the right word, but it's certainly one of these films that really sort of breaks down these race relationships. And again, like you said, this takes place in the 70s, so this is well past the Civil Rights Act and things like that. But these things are still happening.
Oh yeah, and I'm trying to remember. There's a good extended scene in the middle. I want to say is there silence or there's a montage or a song or something in the middle, when they're in the gymnasium and all that. Mm-hmm. Just fantastic filmmaking.
Black Klansman is one of the best films of the year, for sure.
Great soundtrack,
yeah, it's fantastic. Too. As well, the score is really great. I thought this movie was directed really well. And like we mentioned it, I think in a previous podcast, the ending of this film is not uplifting. It is in both endings of the film. So the actual film ends, obviously, right? And it's not super uplifting because it sort of reminds you that, Laura Harrier and John David Washington are in that apartment, and the film sort of reminds you, this isn't over. There's people out there, and I'm not going to spoil the final actual filmmaking shot of the movie because the movie ends with various clips of things like Charlottesville. And you know what? This movie's been out long enough. If you haven't seen it, and it's not going to change your opinion of it. But it's a very powerful final minute and a half, 2 minutes that Spike Lee sort of compiles all this footage of recent events. As recent as last year, sort of together. And I thought that was a gut punch. And I saw this with Marissa, and we kind of just sat through some of the credits, just stunned at the way this film ended. So it's powerful.
Also, a nice cameo by Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, yeah, it is for sure. I love that. All right, anything else about Black Klansman? So my Black Klansman was my number 7. Max's number 4. So we're on to my number 3 film. And my number 3 film is a movie, another small movie. We're getting into the 3 here that Max is probably going to scoff at because he'll call me pretentious or whatever you want to say. But my number 3 film is a film that kind of falls in line with something that I've been really interested in the last few years. There seems to be this sort of rise of really naturalistic filmmaking. And what I mean by that is people that use non-professional actors. It's set in a very realistic setting with people who know this area. You think about things like Sean Baker's The Florida Project that came out last year. A very naturalistic film about basically extreme poverty. I mean, Willem Dafoe is in that film, but the main characters in the movie are not actors and things like that. And you think about all these different films that have come out that sort of envelop this naturalism. And the film I was most fascinated with, I guess the second most interesting film that I was fascinated with as far as naturalism goes, because my number 2 also falls in line with that, is Chloe Zhao's film, The Rider. So The Rider is my number 3 film of the year. I saw this movie. I rented it from Redbox because I had heard really good things about it. This was also an early year release, March, April, something like that. And the film follows our non-professional actor, Brady Jandreau, who in the film plays Brady Blackburn, who is a rodeo rider who suffers multiple concussions and can't ride anymore. And the film sort of follows his journey of accepting who he is now, that he can't ride. And his dad also plays his real life dad. His real life sister plays his sister in the film. His real life sister, Lily Jandreau, has some developmental issues in the movie. And so in the movie, it's just really powerful. And Chloe Zhao, who now has been handed the reins of a Marvel film, really does a fantastic job directing this movie. Getting the performances out of these actors. And I mean, they're not even actors. I mean, these... And some people say, I've read criticisms of naturalistic films, whereas it's not really acting because they're just basically reenacting their real life, and that's true. But you also need to but people also need to keep in mind that this is a film. So I mean, you are trying to dramatize things, and I don't really know what I'm going with that. But my point is that the non-professional acting in this film works on a level that I think better than any, maybe save for one film, my number 2 film of the year. And I just think it works so well. The performances are great. Brady Jandreau is fantastic, and if that dude wanted to act more, I would watch anything he did because he's just so natural in this. And again, I'm sure he's drawing from things he knows. There's a really powerful scene in this movie where Brady goes and visits a real rider who is paralyzed, can't speak, but he sort of helps this young man, maybe feel normal for a little while. It's a film that I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. I think it is. I'll look it up really quick. But it's something I would highly recommend, done by a really, really great filmmaker who has a great eye. It's beautiful. It was shot in South Dakota. These people are actually from South Dakota. It's brilliantly shot. The cinematography is fantastic. Let me just look it up really quick and see if it's streaming anywhere. I want to say it's like on Stars. If you have Stars, I don't have Stars, but I thought I read that somewhere that this was streaming on Stars. Yep, that's what it is. It's Stars. So The Rider is my number 3 movie of the year. I just think it's really, really solid filmmaking. Really great naturalistic performances. Another movie I would say that you could throw in that naturalistic sense is Krisha from 2015, a really great film by director Trey Edward Schultz. This is a movie I think if you haven't seen, no matter what kind of movies you like, this is such a relatable story, such a connectable story to these characters. So my number 3 was The Rider.
The Rider. I will have to check that out.
It's great. I think you'd really like it, actually. All right, what's your number 3?
Definitely. My number 3, and this one might surprise you. This is a smaller film. It didn't get a very wide release, I don't believe. I mean, it had a wide release, but it wasn't. It wasn't a big box office blockbuster or anything.
Right.
But I thought the acting was absolutely fantastic. I thought the way it was shot was fantastic. And the story was gripping. And for me, who didn't know I didn't know the true story behind all this, the ending was not what I expected, and I like that. My number 3 is Borg vs. McEnroe.
Okay, yeah, I like this movie. It's not on my list, but go ahead.
I thought it's a tremendous movie. I thought touching on the rivalry between Bjorn Borg, who leading up to the film, I believe he was 25. He had won 4 Wimbledon championships in a row, and John McEnroe, the foul-mouthed American, who was not well liked at all for his outbursts and I believe his catchphrase was, "Are you fucking kidding me?" To say
the least, nobody liked him.
Yeah. And so it kind of shows Bjorn's childhood and everything, and then McEnroe as well, leading up to the 1980 Wimbledon Championships, which culminates in their encounter in the men's singles final, which generally is regarded as the greatest Wimbledon final of all time, as well as one of the greatest tennis matches of all time. Also has a stellar performance from one of my favorite actors, Stellan Skarsgård, who plays Borg's coach. And the reason I like this movie so much is I thought it touched on a topic that doesn't usually get mentioned very much, and that's burnout. Bjorn Borg won 4 tennis championships, or 4 Wimbledon championships. He's the best tennis player in the world. And you can see that everything he does is to win, but you can tell that he's not enjoying himself anymore. He's playing tennis to win. And you see someone like John McEnroe, who as aggressive and immature as he is, he's incredibly talented, and he loves playing tennis.
Yeah.
And I thought the movie was very well acted. It's Swedish. Sverre Gunnarsson plays Bjorn Borg. Shia LaBeouf as John McEnroe. But I just thought that the filming was great. The way they led up to the ending, which, as I said, I didn't know what the ending was. And so the way they shot that I thought was brilliant. And the way they kind of wrapped everything up, I just thought it was and it's more of a story about Bjorn Borg than it is John McEnroe, truly. But there's a lot of well-known people that were involved. I didn't realize, I mean, that's my fault, but I didn't realize Arthur Ashe played tennis. Obviously, the Arthur Ashe Courage Award is given out every year. I didn't realize Arthur Ashe was a famous tennis athlete, but Peter Fleming, Jimmy Connors, I mean, these all were major tennis figures that were involved around the time, and McEnroe and Bjorn Borg were the two top tennis players in the world. I just thought it was a really good movie because Shia LaBeouf is fantastic. You never know what you're going to get with Shia LaBeouf, but as crazy as he is, and I've always maintained, he is a fantastic actor.
So good.
He's a fantastic actor. It was a really enjoyable movie for me. I thought the story was incredibly well done. It wasn't campy. It didn't hype itself up for hype's sake. This wasn't like a Mark Wahlberg, just hyping it up for the drama. I mean, the drama was the drama.
Yeah.
It didn't feel forced to me, which I thought was the best part of it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that's the strongest part of the movie is the director who I don't have the director in front of me, but whoever
Janice Metz Peterson.
Yeah, Peterson's direction here.
He directed an episode of True Detective, but I mean, really, he's unknown. Really.
His direction here works perfectly for this story because you're right, Max. He does sort of kind of reel it in and let that inherent drama of the tennis match, the seemingly never-ending tennis match that bookends the film, not bookends, but ends the film. It's inherently dramatic. You don't have to dramatize it, and I think the director does a fantastic job of doing that. And you're right; it's a terrific performance by the guy who plays Borg. It's a great performance by the guy, by the guy who plays McEnroe, by Shia LaBeouf, who is great in the film. And this is what I meant by how good of a year this was. I really, really enjoyed this movie. It's not in my top 30, but that's just kind of a testament from me personally of the quality of filmmaking that came out this year and how good this movie actually is. I was surprised. I thought I would like it. It has good reviews. And I thought I would like it because I like Shia LaBeouf's performance. I think he's an interesting actor to watch. I think he makes really interesting choices with his decisions to what films to make. But I ended up really enjoying this film more than I thought. I was captivated by it. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It's very engaging, and I just really enjoyed the movie. So I'm glad it made your list and we could talk about it.
Yeah, and something I'm thinking about it. Something I really liked about it is it's rare that a movie can make you cheer for, and hate both the characters at the same time, because you've got Bjorn Borg and you watch him as a child and you're thinking, well, he's on top of the world, he's kind of the villain. He's just the dude that's good and we want him to lose. But at the same time, throughout the movie, you become sympathetic for him. You realize he's only a machine because that's what people have turned him into. Mm-hmm. He's a real person behind that. And then McEnroe on the opposite script, you're like, fuck this guy.
Yeah, he seems like
this guy's just a loudmouth.
He's just a dickhead.
Loudmouth dick.
Yeah.
And then as the movie goes on, you go, you know what? He's going through a lot of stuff too, and all they want to talk about is his attitude, but no one talks about how good he is at tennis. And so I think that's why the penultimate moment there in the match is so powerful, because you're cheering for both people at the same time.
Right.
You don't want Bjorn Borg's legacy to fall short and not win the 5th Wimbledon, but at the same time,
but McEnroe works so hard. You want
McEnroe to win. You want McEnroe to dethrone him. And I won't tell you what happened. If you don't know the result of this match, don't look it up. Just watch the movie.
It's way better if you don't watch that, or you don't check it out.
But it generally considered this is the greatest Wimbledon final of all time.
Maybe the best tennis match of all time.
Yeah, one of the best tennis matches of all time. Legendary. I will just say Bjorn Borg, as a result of all this, he was so burned out, he retired from tennis a year later. Yeah. As one of the greatest tennis players ever to play, and he was just done. He was so burned out, and he was so... you get to a point you're on top. I mean, all you're doing is playing to protect your legacy. You're not playing because you enjoy it anymore.
Right.
And that's why they called him Borg the Machine.
Yeah.
This guy would have the temperature in his hotel room set so low, so his heart wouldn't be beating as fast, so he'd be so calm and all that. And I thought it was a fantastic film, fantastic sports film. Probably the greatest tennis movie ever made. I can't think of any off the top of my head. So.
I like Battle of the Sexes more.
Oh yes, I have not seen that. I do want to see that.
That's great.
Certainly one of the top sports movies for me, and it is a sports movie, but I think it falls into the vein of Friday Night Lights, stuff like that, where it's a sports movie, but it's not like an overwhelming sports jock bro movie.
Right.
It's an intelligent sports movie, like Friday Night Lights or Bull Durham, or stuff like that.
Cool.
So that is my number 3, Borg vs. Machina.
All right. So we're on to the top 2. The top 2.
I
think I know one of your top 2 for sure.
I thought I did of yours, but now I'm unsure.
Yeah, I think you'll be. I don't know about blindsided, but I for sure don't think you'll know what my number 1 is. Or my number 2, actually. So my number 2 film of the year is one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the year. It's from a director whose films are transcendent. They are wonderful to watch. And again, we talk more about that sort of naturalistic approach. This is a deeply personal story. And it's really well acted. Get ready to scoff, Max. My number 2 film of the year is Alfonso Cuarón's Roma.
Roma, the Netflix
Yep.
movie.
I haven't seen it on the big screen, so I know there's 27,000 cinephiles out there right now. You didn't see it on the big screen. I didn't. I saw it on my 65-inch TV in my basement. And
cocky.
I really, really loved this film. And there's a reason why it isn't my number 1. I don't know how rewatchable it is, but just the pure craft of Alfonso Cuarón and care he puts into this movie, and it feels so personal. And to me, the main character, if you don't know what Roma is, first of all, it's one of the most awarded films of the year when it comes to critics awards. It's topped several top 10 lists. Roma follows the story of Cleo, and this is a foreign language film as well. There is no English language. There's a little bit of English in this film, but it mostly takes place in Mexico, in Roma, which is a city, or a suburb sort of type area, from my understanding at least, of Mexico City in Mexico. And it follows the story of Cleo, who's played by newcomer Yulitsia Aparicio, who is brilliant in the movie. And she's a maid for a very high-class family in Mexico, and the story is sort of based off of Alfonso Cuarón's experiences growing up. And I believe I could be wrong about this, and I apologize if I am wrong, but I believe he sort of grew up in a high-class home, and it's a story of the maids who, that he knew. But Yulitsia Aparicio plays a maid named Cleo who sort of, takes care of this family, this high-class family. It's shot in black and white. It's shot on one of the most sophisticated digital cameras that you can shoot on. It's got some amazing, amazing visual effects that when you watch this movie, you wouldn't know they're visual effects, some of the shots. I'm not saying everything is, but there's a lot of brilliant, just the technical craft of this movie. If you were going on technical aspects of it, cinematography, and Alfonso Cuarón is his own director of photography on this movie. If you look at the cinematography, the just the straight technical, the way he moves the camera, the way the acting. If you look at this film on just a technical level, this is probably the best made film of the year, just because Cuarón just puts so much care and immense care into making this movie. But again, it does follow the story of this sort of a rich family that definitely has their own troubles. But this movie is unique in the way that Cuarón tells this story. You say, well, it's told through this perspective. This movie is truly told through the maid's perspective. And he moves the camera in and out of rooms. So you get pieces of the drama going on behind the scenes, right? Like you get the drama of the family because it comes, it's a mother and 3 young kids, and the father is always gone, and you find out why. But you just sort of hear it. You hear it in pieces. So Cuarón will pan the camera through the room, and it'll go to Cleo, and she's mopping. She's picking up dog shit in the alley or something like that, or she's cleaning the kitchen. But on the way to see what Cleo's doing, you just hear that brief conversation that they're having. And it's so powerful. And this sort of side story of this sort of crumbling family would be the main story in any other movie. But because the way that Cuarón directs this movie and makes this movie, you are just drifting from scene to scene. It doesn't meander. Some people may think it meanders if you're not sort of into that sort of slower style of filmmaking. It's a longer film. It's like 2 hours, 20 minutes. And it's all set really, and truly, and another thing too, I mean, you hear things like, oh, this is set against the backdrop of this. This is truly set against the backdrop of political turmoil in 70s Mexico. There's a really great scene in this film where Cleo, I don't want to ruin it, but she becomes, she comes up with a personal issue, and they're in this store in Mexico while people are being killed outside by Mexican National Police, and they're flooding in and all of this stuff, and this is all happening, and there's one great scene at the end of this film that involves Yalitza Aparicio's character of Cleo going into the ocean, and I implore you, as soon as you watch this movie, go listen to, maybe not listen to, I can't remember what it is, or read the article that sort of talks about how they shot this scene and Cuarón's vision of shooting a scene in an ocean, which is just visually stunning. Mm-hmm. For a black and white movie, it's one of the most visually stunning movies I've ever seen, and it certainly deserves all of the praise it's getting. And if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's, for God's sakes, everybody has Netflix. Don't watch Bird Box. The movie sucks. Watch Roma. You gotta watch Roma. It is such a beautiful film. And some people won't watch it because they don't want to read subtitles. I get it. I really do. And this movie has become the subject of some criticism because people don't believe Alfonso Cuarón. They don't think Alfonso Cuarón should be able to tell this story because he is, he didn't grow up a poor maid in Mexico. I think that's such bullshit, and I think
are there a lot of poor maids from Mexico making
well
movies?
That's the thing. Like, he's telling this story that, and people say that he shouldn't be allowed to tell this story. The criticism you can read. We're not going to get into that now because it's not worth your time because of how just fantastic this movie is. There is just one other movie that really hit me hard. That's why this isn't my number one. I think in any other year that my number one movie didn't come out, this is the number one movie of the year for me. It's deserving, like I said, it's so deserving of all of the acclaim it's getting. And everybody should watch this movie. I can imagine, it is coming here to Duluth at the Cinema, which is a local art house theater here in Duluth where I live. It is coming on the big screen. I don't know that I'll go see it. But if you can see it on a big screen, I would imagine it is brilliant to see on a big screen. But if you sit down and you watch this movie in a very intimate setting, put your phone away for 2 hours, sort of distract yourself from the world. Roma is a film I think everybody should see, and it's my number 2 film of the year.
That is a solid choice. Like you said, I've heard mixed reviews about Roma. It seems like people either like it or they do not.
Yeah, and that's the personal reactions. I think the critic reaction is overwhelming that this is one of the best films of the year. So,
sure. Excellent choice. Let's see. We're on to number 2
here.
Yep,
you're number 2.
I thought I knew what your choices were going to be here, but I was wrong. This is a movie I thought was incredibly powerful, fantastically directed and acted. Every performance is just absolutely right on. This might be a little cliche, but just because everybody likes it doesn't mean that it's not a great movie. My number 2 is A Star Is Born.
Wow, I thought this would be your number 1. So now I legitimately don't know what your number 1 is, and I'm kind of fascinated. I thought this for sure would be your number 1. Real quick before you start, it's my number 17.
Number 17.
Spoiler alert, it is not my number 1. Go ahead.
I thought it was going to be higher on Riley's list, but I ranked this, and obviously I haven't seen as many movies as Riley had, but I thought basically this is the story of Jackson Maine, played by Bradley Cooper. He's a famous country music singer. He's an alcoholic, drug addicted. Meets a girl named Allie at a drag show, and they kind of fall in love, all that kind of stuff. It's a remake of a remake of a remake of a remake. I think this was originally premiered in 1937, was remade in 1954, 1976, and in 2013 in Bollywood. But it had a lot of famous people attached to it. Clint Eastwood was going to direct with Beyonce to star. Christian Bale, Leonardo DiCaprio, Will Smith, Tom Cruise. I think they made the right decision with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is absolutely mind-blowing. Jason Isbell, who's one of my favorite musicians, in my opinion, one of the most talented songwriters out there, wrote a song, one of my favorite songs that Bradley Cooper sings. Bradley Cooper sings everything, his own stuff. And a lot of the big concert scenes were filmed at Coachella. So those are real audiences.
Not Coachella.
No, it was Coachella.
What's the one in
Coachella?
Glastonbury?
They might have done stuff there too, but
Yep.
Principal photography was at Coachella. But
I thought it wasn't there. Oh, whatever. Sorry, go ahead.
It was. I'm just kind of all over the map with this movie. There's just so much I liked about it. I loved the songs. The songs were awesome. I thought the acting was fantastic. I thought Sam Elliott as Jackson Maine's brother was fantastic. You get a good performance from Andrew Dice Clay coming out of left field.
Oh, he's great.
Andrew Dice Clay is great. Dave Chappelle as Jackson Maine's friend, although...
Apologize for my dog in the background.
Put it down. I'm just kidding. From the previews, I thought Dave Chappelle was going to have a bigger role than he did.
Yeah.
But Dave Chappelle was good, and it's a powerful story. The ending, and I had not seen any of the originals, so I did not expect the ending at all, which to me made the movie better. But it's such a powerful story about humanity, and it kind of goes through Jackson Maine's past and his relationship with his brother and his father, and kind of what made him who he is, and it's a very powerful movie. It's sad. It's uplifting. It's just an overall. It's a good movie. It's not like a rom-com. It's not like a chick flick or anything. It's very hard hitting.
Yeah.
Was nominated for five nominations at the Golden Globe Awards. They would not nominate it as a musical, which I thought was kind of odd.
We'll get to that.
Not that it is a musical, but certainly has many elements of a musical.
I think
was nominated as a drama. But was nominated as a drama. Yep. But this is a movie. In my opinion, this is one of the top movies of 2018. Top mainstream movies, anyway. Again, I've not seen the 37, 54, or 76 film, but I would say this is probably one of the top. A Star Is Born's. Again, I can't state enough how well cast it was. Lady Gaga's voice is amazing, and she sings everything live, and that was important to them. They wanted everything to be live, so all the scenes, none of it's lip syncing or anything. That's her and Bradley Cooper singing. Bradley Cooper actually worked with who was it? Whose son was that?
Willie Nelson's son is involved.
Willie Nelson's son. They did. Willie Nelson's son taught Bradley Cooper how to play guitar and sing. I think it was like 3 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year. And Bradley Cooper lowered his voice a full octave for the movie. So a lot went into it. I love the movie. It was a very powerful movie. The songs are good. They're not just a movie good. They're legitimately good songs, I think. If this doesn't win Best Original Song, it's going to be a crime, I think. But
I think Best Original Song award for. I don't like the song I think the song they're putting up for the Oscars, which is "Shallow."
Shallow got nominated for the Golden Globe.
Yeah, that's probably like one of my least favorite songs in the movie. It's a good song. But it's one of my least favorite songs in the movie. But I think a win for "Shallow" at the Oscars is really just a win for the soundtrack as a whole.
Right.
This does not make my top 10 list. Not because it isn't good. It is one of my favorite movies of the year. I gave it an A-. It's my number 17, like I mentioned. Or no, I can't remember. Where did I put it? Hold on a second here. Where did I put it? My number 17. It's my number 17 for a couple of reasons. Number one, there's been 3 other versions of this, and if you have seen the other ones, I have seen the 54. It's better than the 76 version. It's better than the Barbra Streisand version. I like the Judy Garland version a little bit more, but that's probably because that was the first A Star Is Born version that I had seen, and I think this is good. When they said they were remaking this movie, when they came out that somebody was going to redo this movie, there was a lot of like, well, why are we going to remake all these movies? This is a movie I think you could remake every 30 years and update it, and you could do it really in any medium. You could do it because the original 54 version is about an actor, and then Streisand and Chris Christopherson did it in 76, and then it kind of became about music. You could do this story about anything, and I think this story is always going to be relevant. Whatever time, you could make this movie in 2080, and I think you could make it about, I don't know, whatever is going to be around in 2080, and this movie would still be relevant. It's got a fantastic soundtrack, like you mentioned. I think we'd be remiss to not mention that Sam Elliott is fantastic in this movie.
Yes.
I think it's one of his best performances. He's done a lot of stuff, but I think he's heartbreaking. It's incredible.
He's got to be one of the best supporting actors out there.
For sure.
Has he ever really had a leading role?
He was in a movie a couple years ago called The Hero, which is really, really great about him. He plays a sort of an aging Western star that is kind of at the end of his life, and it's really great. It's directed by Brett Haley, who also directed a really great film this year called Hearts Beat Loud, which we might mention later in the show. Actually, probably not. It's not one of my honorable mentions. So, Hearts Beat Loud. See that if you haven't. But no, this movie is fantastic. It's my number 17 because I just think there are 16 movies that are on my list ahead of it that I just think are more original, better films overall. Not necessarily. I think there's a couple of things, and we'll get to that for sure. I really enjoyed this film. I think Bradley Cooper could and maybe should win an Oscar for his performance because I think he gives the best performance in the film, which is incredible to think that he actually wrote this, directed it, produced it, wrote some of the songs. So I think the fact that his performance is so good is truly a revelation when it comes to this movie. I thought this was going to be your number 1, so I'm surprised that it's your number 2. Now I don't know what your number 1 is. But I like that. No, this is an excellent choice. I think if you were to ask me what my favorite movies of the year were, this would probably make a top 10 of my favorite movies. Putting objectivity aside and things like that, this would definitely make that top 10. Unfortunately, if the way I constructed my list, it just isn't there. But again, that's just another testament. I feel like repeating myself, but that's just a testament to how good of a year this was.
It's a solid year
for movies. That this is my number 17. And I enjoyed the shit out of this movie. So it's a great choice.
Very curious to see what your number 1 is going to be.
My number 1 is a movie that you need to watch because it is now streaming on Amazon Prime. It's directed by a filmmaker whose last film that she did a long time ago was a coming out party for an actress now who's huge, Jennifer Lawrence. That movie was called Winter's Bone. And Jennifer Lawrence earned her first Oscar nomination for that movie. So that was in 2000. I want to say it was 2009. I don't have that in front of me right now. So almost 10 years later, Deborah Granick, who's the director of this film, returns with, to me, a film that really hit me hard as far as its themes, the direction, the storyline, the sort of quiet... I don't know what sort of confidence that she has. My number 1 movie of 2018, my favorite movie of the year, and I think the best movie of 2018 is Leave No Trace. This is a movie about a guy played by Ben Foster, who is one of the most criminally underrated actors that we have today. Maybe one of the best actors of his generation. See Hell or High Water and his stunning lack of nomination for that movie. But Ben Foster plays a former soldier. I can't remember if he's a Marine or an Army or whatever it is. Either way, he was a soldier and he's suffering from PTSD. And he lives in the Pacific Northwest, I think, with his teenage daughter, played by a newcomer to the scene, Thomasin McKenzie, who is brilliant in this movie, but more on that in a minute. And it sort of follows, they're living off the grid. They live in the woods because Ben Foster has sort of, as a character, lost his his faith sort of in humanity. I mean, he goes to the VA. You see him go to the VA, and he gets his pills, and he doesn't take the pills. He sells the pills, to whomever to make the money to buy groceries. And he's sort of teaching his daughter a minimalist style of living. And eventually they get found in the woods, and they sort of have to reintegrate themselves into real life. So he gets a job on this ranch, and she starts going to school and sort of meets, boys for the first time, but it's not like super tropey or, insensitive of how young girls handle those situations. But she's sort of and the movie is really about Thomasin McKenzie's character, whose name is Tom in the movie. His daughter's name is Tom. And she sort of is adjusting herself. It's based on a novel, I believe, too. And I've never read the book. So it's sort of about them adjusting to life, on the grid, essentially. And she learns how to ride a bike for the first time. And they sort of find this community. And Ben Foster is having a hard time adjusting. And it has an ending that's sort of heartbreaking, but also really sweet. And this is one of those movies, and Max is probably going to give me shit for this, but it's just one of those movies that I don't really know how to describe why I like it so much, but it just hit me in a way that Deborah Granick has so much sympathy for these characters, never judges them. She never judges the people who do judge them in the film, because it is such an odd scenario, like they're living in the woods. He's teaching her the things that he thinks are important. She knows how to make a fire. She knows how to sort of live by her own. But also, she's a 13, 14-year-old girl, and she needs to learn how to live in that sort of society. And I just love the way that Deborah Granick sort of displays these characters and never judges them. And never judges the main character for taking his daughter and living in the woods, basically. And I just think it's a really powerful, really beautiful film. That's really, to me, and I think a lot of the people who are championing this film, it has 100% Rotten Tomatoes. It is the best reviewed movie of the year, which you can take that with a grain of salt, because you could have a movie that's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes and the average score is a 6 out of 10. So, I mean, to me, it's just one of those movies that is indescribable why I like it, but it's so good. And I love every second of the movie. And I implore anybody who has not seen it to watch it, because I think it has universal appeal. I can't imagine anybody hating this movie. It's one of those movies where if you see it, you can be like, it's not my thing. But if you watch it once, you can at least appreciate the craft. The cinematography is gorgeous. The acting is fantastic. The script is really tight and fully realized, and the characters feel really lived in. That you sympathize with, very sympathetic characters. So my number one of the year is Leave No Trace. I just loved this movie, and I can't wait to watch it again.
Excellent choice. That is on my list to see for sure.
All right, here it is. Your number one. I'm so curious about this. So let's hear it.
My number one is something I thought a lot about, and it's probably not even on your top 30, but the way I felt in the theater watching this movie was something I had never felt before. Watching this movie in the theater, I had brought some snacks and stuff, and I didn't eat any. I didn't eat any of them. I just couldn't bring myself to eat anything. And the reason I couldn't is because if I would have done that, it would have made noise. My number one is A Quiet Place.
Oh, wow! I'm actually kind of surprised.
To me, the movie, it does fall into a couple of monster movie cliches or whatever, but I thought it was very intelligent. I thought the fact that so basically, we got John Krasinski, who directed it with Emily Blunt, and Emily Blunt, Millicent Simmons, and Noah Jupe. It's a family facing struggles in a post-apocalyptic world, basically inhabited by blind monsters that have an acute sense of hearing. Right off the bat, the first scene just punches you in the gut. Yeah. Right off the bat, with their son. And to me, the most powerful part of the movie is that it's quiet. I mean, I literally was in the theater. I didn't want to open anything. I didn't want to make any noise. And the theater felt that too. I mean, it was quiet. and they could have relied on jump scares with it being that quiet, but I don't really think they did that. They didn't really rely on jump scares. It was obviously not a horror movie. I guess it's a drama, but
thriller. I would say it's a horror movie.
Yeah, it's right. I guess, yeah, it's right there. What I thought was really cool is that the deaf daughter was actually played by a deaf actress. Yep. So that was real.
She was in Wonderstruck last year with Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes' movie.
Good actress, yeah. And just the way they do everything, it's almost like the movie Signs, except I think obviously the monsters are way better. And I just like the way they set everything up, where they're all being quiet and this and that. And to me, it was unlike any movie I'd seen before. And as you know, I place a lot of value in that, how I feel in the moment when I'm watching it. And just sitting in the theater watching it, you felt like you were there. Like you didn't want to breathe. Right. You didn't want to cough or anything. and the whole theater felt that, And I thought it was a very sharp horror movie. It didn't fall into classic horror movie cliches, and obviously the ending, I thought was interesting. It wasn't necessarily what I would have expected. It was, I thought it was a pretty intelligent ending. Yeah. And they are gonna film a sequel, due out in 2020.
Yeah.
But Krasinski's was fantastic. Emily Blunt was also fantastic. It kind of drew inspiration, I think, from other films like Alien, No Country for Old Men, In the Bedroom, those kind of movies. And Krasinski, as far as his direction,
I like that comparison. That's actually a really good comparison.
Yeah, and what's also amazing about this movie is that really, with the exception of one old couple, there's 4 people in this movie. Mm-hmm. There are 4 people in this movie, and a lot of times it's hard to keep the focus on, keep people's focus when it's just 4 people. Because you have to be really invested in those characters, otherwise you don't care about the movie. Because that's all you see, and you feel invested in these people's lives, in the daughter, and you can feel the weight of the of tragedy that weighs on the daughter, and then weighs on the parents. And the only thing I would say is, in that situation, maybe stop having sex, and don't bring a child into this world. But I really enjoyed it, and like I said, as far as me personally, I'm not a horror movie guy. I don't like horror movies. But I really like this movie, so if this movie could capture my attention and give you that startle, someone called it smart, wickedly frightening, good time. I think that's an excellent review of it. Yeah. It's nominated for a bunch of Golden Globes, Best Original Score. The music was good. They wanted John Krasinski didn't want it to just be a silent movie. They wanted music in the background, but that is all there is. Yeah. Besides the noise that these families make. And the performances were great. I thought Krasinski's direction was great.
Really impressed by the way he directed this film.
Yeah, I think the endings were appropriate. They weren't over the top campy. They weren't like a traditional horror movie cliche. And the monsters, I mean, they look pretty fucking scary too. I enjoyed it overall. Just really good film.
You're right. It isn't in my top 30. However, it would probably be like my number 31. Whatever that means, too. I mean, that's so arbitrary. But, I mean, top 10 lists in general are usually fairly arbitrary. No, it's a fantastic pick. And you're right. The opening sequence is probably the most interesting, really exciting, really the best sequence, I think, of the year in any movie. Just the gut punch of that opening sequence, and you don't know where it's going, which I think is even better.
Right. You don't expect that lead in.
And that's all credit due to John Krasinski and his script. This is another example of a super impressive writer-director star, like Bradley Cooper in A Star Is Born. Yeah, man, it's a good pick. A Quiet Place, it's a really good film. I own it on 4K Blu-ray. I can't wait to watch it again. And really, it sounds pretentious, but if you didn't see this movie in a theater, I'm sorry. You missed out. You really did. This movie, I think the best way to experience this movie is in a theater. The sound design is some of the best sound design I've ever heard. Just the way that his sound team was able to just literally suck the noise out of everything is just so impressive. It's one of the most impressive movies of the year for sure. And it's a completely valid pick, I think, for number one.
I really enjoyed it.
And again, hate to be a broken record, but it just shows how good of a year this was. That this is your number one, and it's not even in my top 30. Just so many good movies. So that's our list. That only took like an hour and some minutes, and we still have a little bit more to go here. We'll try to breeze through some of this for you guys.
An hour and some minutes. It took an hour and 55 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
So 2 hours.
Well, we didn't start the top 10 straight away. It probably took us about an hour and 10 minutes. Really quick, let's go into some honorable mentions. I know you told me, you texted me earlier, said you had 5. Let me just run down my 30. I'm not going to say anything about these movies.
I had a few more, but yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll run down my 30 through 11. And again, I'm not going to say anything about these movies, but in order from 30 to 11, this is how I had them ranked. My number 30 was Vice. Number 29 is Wildlife. Number 28, Black Panther. Number 27, Sorry to Bother You. 26, Avengers Infinity War. 25, Mid-90s. 24, an Italian film called Happy as Lazzaro, which is on Netflix. Number 23, Boy Erased. 22, Thunder Road, a really small indie film. Number 21, The Old Man and the Gun. Number 21st, Reformed. Number 19, 22, July. Number 18, Private Life, a Netflix film. 17, A Star is Born. 16, Won't You Be My Neighbor. Number 15 was Support the Girls. Number 14, The Favorite. Number 13, Widows. Number 12, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. And just missing my list at number 11 was Bo Burnham's 8th Grade. So those were all my honorable mentions. So go ahead, Max. And if you guys want to know anything about them, just watch them. That's all you really need to know. And we're not going to sit here and talk about 20 other movies because we do have other things we want to talk about. So if you want to know anything about those films, just watch them if you haven't seen them. So.
All right. So my honorable mentions, and these are in no particular order. Yep. Starting out with a movie I was very disappointed with, Bad Times at the El Royale.
I like that movie.
Good film, not as good as I thought it would be. Alpha, Deadpool 2, Avengers Infinity War, Black Panther came out in 2018.
Correct, came out in February.
Black Panther, Annihilation, Bohemian Rhapsody, Solo, A Star Wars Story.
Really?
And the Death of Stalin. I think it's an honorable mention. I'm not saying it's a great film, but it's an honorable mention.
I've only seen it once, but we'll get into this a little bit more. Solo was one of my biggest disappointments of the year because the more I thought about it, we talked about it with John on the last podcast.
But that's because people compare it to the other Star Wars movies.
And that's
on its own, it's a solid movie.
And that's not why it's a disappointment for me. I just think thematically, just the way it was made. But we'll get into that a little bit. But no, that's a solid list as well. And I would definitely recommend seeing any of these movies. Annihilation, I just haven't. If I saw it again, I've only seen it the one time. That's a movie I think you have to watch more than once to really.
It's a mind fuck.
But it's really, really well done.
Yeah.
So let's really briefly, because I don't want to run all night with this. Let's just kind of briefly touch into the other things we wanted to talk about. Let's talk about some best performances.
Best performances, just real quick.
Yep, we'll run through those. Yeah. I have, for best performances, I have Christian Bale in Vice, Timothée Chalamet in Beautiful Boy, which is a movie I didn't necessarily care for that much, but I thought he was great in it. One that's going to probably surprise Max, but I was enthralled with the way she was in this movie. Emily Blunt in Mary Poppins Returns. I thought she was great. We talked about John David Washington in Black Klansman. Shout out to Regina Hall, who, if you don't know who Regina Hall is, the best thing I can say is that she plays. She's in Scary Movie. She's one of the characters in Scary Movie. She's fantastic in Support the Girls. The trio of Rachel Weisz, Emma Stone, and Olivia Colman in The Favorite. Elizabeth Debicki in Widows. Elsie Fisher in 8th Grade. Catherine Hahn in Private Life. Ethan Hawke in First Reformed. I thought he's fantastic. The young kid Sonny Soljic in mid-90s. Young man Ed Oxenbould. A lot of my performances are ones by young actors. Ed Oxenbould in Wildlife, Paul Dano's movie. Lucas Hedges in Boy Erased. God, there's so many good performances. Bradley Cooper in A Star Is Born.
Seems like we just listed every movie you saw.
Yulitsia Aparicio in Roma, which we talked about, obviously. Just kind of to touch on some of those. Toni Collette in Hereditary. Hereditary is a movie we have not mentioned. She's great in that. Rami Malek I thought was good in Bohemian Rhapsody, but as a film I didn't care for it. And then the only other one I had was, if I'm just looking at my list here, well, I have a couple, but I'll pick one more.
Just one more?
Shit. If to pick one more performance to highlight, it's so hard. I'll go with... Oh, man. This is hard. I'll go with for my last one. I will go with Laura Dern in a film called The Tale, which was on HBO. Technically not a theatrical release, but it's a really powerful film directed by Jennifer Fox. So, what else did you want to bring up?
Well, I didn't have as...
Oh, I'm sorry. And one more. Natalie Portman in Vox Lux is great.
Of course.
Okay, go ahead.
Just one more.
That's all I have.
And another one.
Another one.
And another one. I didn't have as many as you. I did have one. I think it's off your radar, but obviously Christian Bale, Dick Cheney in Vice, Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga as Jackson Maine and Allie in A Star Is Born, Shia LaBeouf as John McEnroe.
Yep.
Adam Driver in Black Klansman. I thought, personally, I liked his performance better than John David Washington's. Not that John David Washington's wasn't fantastic,
right?
But I thought Adam Driver was really the straw that stirred the drink there.
I agree. I think it's the strongest performance in the movie, for sure.
Yeah. And also from Black Klansman, Jasper Pakonin, who plays Felix Hendrickson, the crazy KKK dude.
Okay.
I thought that was a really good performance.
I agree.
You know, like, he's probably not going to get nominated for anything, but that dude is crazy. Like, that was a pretty good performance, you know?
Yeah.
And he played really well with Adam Driver, the scene where he shoots the car or whatever. You want me to take your gay Jew test now? And
yeah.
That's great.
It's fantastic.
And then Rami Malek, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah. I'm kind of the same way with you. I enjoyed it just because I enjoyed the performances, but as far as the true, story of Queen, it was pretty whitewashed. But I'm glad they did touch on Freddie's sexuality. Remember that idiot that, like, the trailer came out and he goes, they cis-washed it.
Yep.
They made it for straight people.
No.
Well, if that dumb shit would have watched the movie, he, instead of knee-jerk commenting after the first trailer, he would have realized they did not. Freddie's homosexuality and promiscuity were really on stage there, and then not in a negative way. I don't think, for the most part. But it sounds like the actual stuff about Freddie, like his relationship with the two gentlemen. I can't remember their names, but the one that kind of ruined his life, and then the one he ended up marrying, or not marrying, but being with till his death, and then his relationship with his I'm forgetting all. Was it Mary Jane? Mary Austin?
Yeah.
What's her name?
Mary something. Yeah.
Mary. Yes, but that and that was all very very accurate, I'm told, by my sources.
By your sources.
Good performances there. I'll jump us into biggest surprises here.
Okay. Or do we want to do the worst real quick? Just to, or we can do a surprise. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm mostly going to piggyback off your worst.
Okay.
I just have one thing there. So let's just go biggest surprise. Just real quick. Don't have a whole lot. My biggest surprise, I'm a well-known Melissa McCarthy hater. I think she sucks as an actress, but you know what? Haven't seen it yet, but she's fantastic in Can You Ever Forgive Me from everything I'm reading. I do need to read that. That's actually one of the highest rated movies of the year.
Mm-hmm. I also have not seen it, unfortunately.
But Melissa McCarthy sounds like a fantastic performance. So kudos to her. I rip on her a lot, but sounds like she does have some acting chops in there. Biggest surprise, A Star Is Born. I think that going into it, I thought, this looks kind of campy. This could be a decent movie, but was actually fantastic. Alpha. I thought this movie was going to be horse shit. Riley thought it was going to be horse shit. Yeah, we talked about this. We're both like, this looks terrible. Actually, not a bad movie. The acting was good. Pacing was good. Story was good. Was a pleasant surprise to me. And then, as I mentioned... Real quick, I
know we reviewed it on the show. I did end up seeing Alpha, and I also I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. So, go ahead.
It was much better than
I agree.
And my final surprise, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yep.
I thought it would just kind of be like a sleepy little documentary about Mr. Rogers. Actually ended up really enjoying it.
My biggest surprises, we talked about a couple of them. I thought, usually I'm underwhelmed by studio comedies. There seems to be one good one a year. So that was my biggest surprise. So I listed like Game Night, Blockers, and even Instant Family were all studio comedies I thought were fantastic. Instant Family in particular I thought was really great, but Blockers is funny as hell too. Game Night was probably my favorite of those. I also listed The Hate You Give. I thought that movie was ultimately going to end up being a sort of, ham-fisted, tale of racial injustice and racial politics, which we'll get into in a minute on the opposite end. But I ended up really just being drawn in by The Hate You Give. I thought that movie was fantastic. And then sort of out of left field for me, Den of Thieves. I really enjoyed Den of Thieves. I thought it was a really fun action movie. I thought Gerard Butler was Gerard Butler, but I thought it was really, really... it was an engaging action movie, and it was long, but it doesn't feel like that length. Usually those shitty action... But this came out in January of last year, so... I mean, this movie's a year old. I really enjoyed Den of Thieves. Would I watch it again? Maybe. I think if I was in the right area, I would watch Den of Thieves again. So that was mine. Let's get in. I know you said you had one worst. I'm just going to list a few.
Well, I do have a little list of biggest disappointments too.
So do I.
We'll opposed to just the worst film.
Let's get to disappointments in a minute. Just worst. I want to talk about a couple. I had a list of 20. I didn't see a lot of shitty movies this year, to be honest with you. The lack of having Movie Pass for the better part of the year affected that. Like I said, in 2017, I went to the theater a lot, saw a lot of garbage I wouldn't go see. But now, that it's my own money, basically, that I'm using on movies, I didn't go see a lot of garbage. Mile 22, I think, is exceptionally awful. I Feel Pretty, not a good film. The Predator is garbage. Pacific Rim Uprising. Gotti is just as terrible as everybody says it is.
Gotti was on my list. That was the only thing I had for worst.
Gringo is really bad. Rampage, Night School, The Commuter. A Wrinkle in Time isn't bad. It's just such a bland blockbuster. And I think
sounds like that could have been a lot better.
Yeah, and I think Ava DuVernay deserves better. Forever My Girl, really bad. 50 Shades Freed, obviously. I'm glad that shit pile's over with. Winchester was fucking terrible.
They butchered. That's a good story.
Yeah, it is a good story.
The actual story of the Winchester House, they fucked up.
Maze Runner: The Death Cure, and I had liked the first Maze Runner, and they progressively got worse. So Maze Runner: The Death Cure is really bad. And then the only other one I had was the 1517 to Paris. Which, of the two Clint Eastwood movies that came out this year, is clearly the worst. I did see The Mule. I thought it was good. Thought it was fine. But the 1517 to Paris. And Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Terrible.
Oh, God.
Let's get into biggest disappointments. Then. Do you want to start with this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can start. And this first one really hurts. It's really tough for me to say this. I was really, really hoping this would be good. I've got high hopes, but it didn't do it for me. Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald.
I was curious if you saw this, because this is also on my list. I thought it was atrocious. I thought it was such a mess. I thought the timelines of what they're doing doesn't make any sense. And I thought it was a movie that just because... This is a prime example of just because you can do something, because J.K. Rowling did write the screenplay for this, and she obviously is the mastermind behind the Wizarding World. I think it's a perfect example of just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And I thought this movie took twists and turns that didn't make any sense, doesn't fit the Wizarding World as I personally know it and like it. I agree. It's also on my biggest disappointments list.
I like... Hold on. The cat's eating something. Hey! Get... damn it. Anyway, it'll be fine probably. If they would have just gone for Dumbledore versus Grindelwald right off the bat, I think that would have been more interesting. But Eddie Redmayne, I don't give a shit.
He's so uninteresting. It's such an uninteresting character.
That could have been a fine, a la Star Wars, a standalone film. Yeah.
Well, and I think they take the two most interesting characters to me from the first movie, Queenie and Jacob, and they just totally destroy those characters in this movie. You know what? They're not interesting, and they were the most interesting, most charismatic characters I thought in the first film, which I enjoyed quite a bit.
This might be racist, but I don't fucking care about the American Wizards.
Yeah.
Why do we need that? I don't care.
I don't care either.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Catherine Waterston is so bland in this movie too. She's
so bland. I don't care, and that's the biggest thing. I don't care about that. like in Harry Potter, like you care about Harry, Hermione, Ron, Snape, Dumbledore, all these guys. This one's like Eddie Redmayne. He's got some creatures and does some stuff, but just so disappointing. Well, it really pissed me off because I really want to see the Grindelwald Dumbledore backstory. But I do have hope that the next few movies I think will be better. I think they needed to fall on the sword and set it up.
That was my problem with this movie.
This one was bad.
It just felt like filler. It felt like filler to get to the next thing, and that was my biggest problem with it. And this movie, the franchise finally got some star power with Jude Law and Johnny Depp. I think Johnny Depp is wasted in this movie. I also think Jude Law is wasted as Dumbledore in this movie. I think they set up some interesting things, and I will see another one because we watch movies. That's what we do. I will see another one, but I just was left with a sour taste after The Crimes of Grindelwald. So I'm interested. I was curious if you would mention that one at all.
Hopefully this is kind of a kick in the pants to them that they need to not fuck this up. And I think J.K. Rowling is talented enough to realize that.
I don't think she's honed the screenwriting. I think she's a really good novel writer. I think these two movies that she's written as a screenwriter are lacking in the script department as well. I think a lot of the characters are underdeveloped.
I think it could have been better if she would have written this as a book first.
I agree.
Like a full book, and that would be really interesting. That's a huge backstory we all want to see.
And you know what? I don't even think it would be bad if they would hand it over to a more experienced screenwriter. I think you could have done something with this movie if you handed it over to a more experienced writer.
She can still write the story. I thought and have a screenwriter write the script.
I thought the dialogue in this was atrocious, but we'll save that. One of my disappointments is a movie that I think you liked more than me, Venom. I thought Venom. I thought a lot of Venom was great. We didn't ultimately end up reviewing this. We did see it when you were here, and we did that podcast, and we reviewed A Star Is Born and stuff like that. We did go see Venom together, but I just didn't care for Venom. Another one I had was
Venom.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say Venom. Venom, when the movie is on Venom, is.
I agree. I thought the Venom parts are the best.
Except for the fight scenes suck, but and I think the the real movie trailers review was perfect. Science, don't give a shit. Science, don't give a shit. Venom, this part's good. More science, don't give a shit.
And Riz Ahmed is such an uninteresting villain in this film. I just didn't care for any of that.
The Venom parts, though, were hilarious.
I agree.
The actual parts with the Venom were great.
Real quick, before we get to some of yours, I have a few movies I don't think you've seen. The Happy Time Murders, very disappointed by that. Simply
that's on my list. I haven't seen it, but
simply based on the expectations brought up by the trailer. Happy Time Murders, White Boy Rick, I thought was a mess, and I was really looking forward to that. And the only other one I have is a movie that I really don't understand the praise for it. And I don't understand the awards, and it will get Oscar nominations. Is Green Book? I think this movie is tone deaf. I think I don't think it's atrocious. I think Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali are fine. But Green Book to me is a movie that's racism for dummies. It seems like a film you'd show your middle school class about what racism was like in the 60s in the South. And like just the more that comes out about this movie, like they didn't do it. Like Don Shirley's estate was not happy with this film, and I think they have every right to be upset. Because this movie is basically just like Viggo Mortensen teaching Mahershala Ali's character how to be more black. Like there's a scene where like, we eat fried chicken, I talk in an Italian accent. And they're both great actors, and they're both very charismatic, and they're fine. And the movie to me just, I don't hate it. I think it's offensive in the fact that it's whitewashing. It's Viggo Mortensen, like I said, it's Viggo Mortensen teaching Mahershala Ali's character how to be more black, and I find that offensive, and I don't think that was a true representation of the character of Don Shirley in real life. I know it's one you were really looking forward to, and I was also looking forward to it. It's a feel-good movie. I think racism for dummies is the best way to describe Green Book. Personally, I'm in the minority. I know a lot of people liked this movie. I'm in the camp of somebody who just really, really did not care for it. So,
Fair enough. As I already mentioned, I was very, very disappointed by Bad Times at the El Royale. I thought the pacing was horrible. I thought it was jarred together, and it was just jarring. And the acting was good, the story itself was good, but I
really liked Bad Times at the El Royale.
I enjoyed it. To me, my expectations coming in were a lot higher than I think they actually ended up being. Yeah. It disappointed me. Welcome to Marwan.
Ooh, I heard that's awful. Did you see it, or are you just going off of?
No, okay. just what I'm heard. Yeah. But looking at the trailer and everything, and looking at the actual story, the true story, it's a movie that has a lot of potential, but it sounds like
there's a really great documentary about it, and I haven't seen it. But
there is a really good documentary. It's called Marwin. It's Marwin isn't the full name. It's like Unveil. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I've seen parts of that. And
it's Robert Zemeckis.
Everything that happens is true.
Robert Zemeckis is a great director.
Back to the Future.
Welcome to Marwin. I haven't seen it yet. I do kind of want to see it, just because I heard it is bad. So, Welcome to Marwin to me, really quick, because we do need to move on, and we do need to get out of here. But Welcome to Marwin to me seems like the downsizing of last year, because downsizing was always considered to be an Oscar contender, I think, because of the pedigree involved with Alexander Payne directing that movie and the stars involved with Matt Damon. And then it came out and it kind of underwhelmed people. And then Welcome to Marwin, I think, was the one remaining chip in the Oscar race to really sort of be like, well, this could be a contender. And then it came out and that chip finally dropped. So obviously Welcome to Marwin isn't getting any Oscar nominations. So so that's what we did. One other thing I wanted to bring up about 20...
Hold on. I got two more. Well, I got one more. You already talked about the Happy Time Brothers. Why does Kevin Hart keep getting acting jobs? I'm so sick of seeing Kevin Hart in movies.
Which one are you talking about?
I'm so disappointed. I don't know, Back to School, whatever.
Night School? Yeah, that was on my worst list.
Tiffany Haddish. Any movie he's in with Ice Cube or The Rock. Dude's a hilarious comic, but a terrible actor. He's one-shot Willie. Yeah. He's got one thing, and that's one funny thing. That's all he's got. Also, just real quick, Sherlock Holmes and Watson. John C. Reilly, Will Ferrell. Terrible. Sounds like it's just those two slapstick comedy, no substance. Really disappointing because those guys are really funny. Talladega Nights. It's disappointing, but that's what it is. So.
One last thing I think we should mention, or I'm going to mention about 2018, is I really, really thought this year was the year of the female filmmaker. I thought there was a magnitude of fantastic films directed by women, which is so great to see. Because, I'm certainly not, I guess this is going to come off probably bad. I'm not a social justice warrior or anything, but I do think there needs to be more representation in cinema. And I thought this year was an incredible leap forward with all the great movies that were directed by women this year. I think alone in my top 10, I think I had 3 or 4 movies directed by women. I don't know when the last time that was the case. So that's awesome to see. We were going to talk about the Golden Globes. I think we'll skip that. I think next week we'll maybe talk about the results of the Golden Globes, which happen tomorrow night. I think it will be the only thing I will say about the Globes is that I think it will be a big indicator going forward of Vice's sustainability in the Oscar race. So I think Vice is a movie to watch tomorrow night when it comes to the Golden Globes. Curious to see what Andy Samberg and Sandra Oh do. Other than that, I don't really care. I will watch the ceremony. Because I'm curious.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, as good as Black Klansman is, it's going to get buried by A Star Is Born. I think A Star Is Born is going to win.
I think that's the safe choice too, yeah.
You've got some strong contenders in If Beale Street Could Talk and Black Klansman. I don't think Bohemian Rhapsody and Black Panther realistically have a choice or have a shot.
They might go big and go Black Panther. I think they'll go A Star Is Born too. I think they'll want Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga up on that stage because the Hollywood Front Press. They've gotten better. They're still star fuckers, in my opinion. I think they just want to nominate the best, and that's why they have the 2 stupid categories. I think Bohemian Rhapsody and A Star Is Born are musicals for sure. Shouldn't be in that category. Right. I don't think Vice is a comedy. I don't think Green Book's a comedy. I don't think any of these movies a lot of these movies they have in comedy. For Christ's sake, The Martian is funny, but it's not a fucking comedy. And they nominated that as a comedy a couple of years ago. So. That's all we'll say about the Golden Globes for now. We'll talk about that next week. Next week, I'd like to do some stuff about award season. So hopefully we'll get into that next week. Looking forward to 2019. I think maybe we could do something later in the week or maybe next week again as well, previewing 2019. This has gotten a little long, though. We're up over 2 hours. Before editing it down. So
thank you to our dedicated fans who are still here.
The only thing I will say, Max,
we love all one of you.
What's your most anticipated film of 2019?
Oh boy, I
have 2.
I'm prepared to answer that. Probably Star Wars is one of them, just off the cuff. Just because that's just such a popular series. Yeah. But I got to do some more research on what's coming out in 2019. I know there's a lot of stuff I am excited for, but I got to do some more research.
I have two. I have Avengers Endgame. I can't wait for. Really excited about that. Yes. And then the only one that I would mention right now is Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Very much looking forward to that film.
Yes.
But yeah, Star Wars for sure. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the coming weeks and months. I'm looking forward to that as well. 2019, hopefully going to be a big year for us here at the Real Takes podcast. We want to do more reviews. We want to do more shows. We want to do more content for you guys. I want to get more stuff up on our website on reeltakes.com. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and sign off. So you can follow us, of course, on Facebook. No Twitter yet. Hopefully we'll get there. You can listen to us on a multitude of different platforms. Again, like I said, I'll segment this out so you guys can listen to just what you want to listen to. If you want to just listen to the top 10 segment, I'll write those time codes in, as well as if you want to listen to the rest of our 2018 talk. We ultimately ended up going a little bit longer than I wanted to, but we'll deal with it for the time going. In fact, we actually went way too long, in my opinion. We spent a little bit too much time on some things, but
appreciate you guys sticking with us. If you're still here, we'll try to revamp this podcast going into 2019, and maybe we'll get popular enough for some giveaways.
Yeah, maybe we'll hit it big. And again, you can listen to us on various podcast platforms: Google Podcasts, no Apple Podcasts. We'll figure that out this year because that is the way to go. Spotify as well, Breaker, Stitcher, all kinds of different podcast outlets. You can go get us on YouTube. Look for more reviews, more podcast episodes. 2019, big year. Looking forward to it. Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everybody had a great Christmas and a great end of 2018. I, on a personal note, did, but we'll go from there. So really excited for what's to come. Hopefully we can do something with this, and if not, it's just a really fun hobby. I like talking movies with you, Max. So
yeah, and you guys will be coming out in March.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Coming out to Montana to see me, so it'll be
absolutely
fun. So.
I'm looking forward to that as well.
Should be a blast. So,
all right, everybody. For Max
Thanks,
and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll see you guys hopefully next week.
Take care.